Good evening and welcome, our in-house and live stream Conval community, to the Conval 6th Community Forum. We, the school board and administration, want to sincerely thank you for all the time, or for all of you taking your time, your valuable time to share in this important information and communications event. I'm Alan Edelkind, Conval School Board representative from Dublin. Before I talk about the project that is the purpose of this forum, I'd like to take a minute to talk about your school board and administration. We as your school board and administration have an obligation to do what is best for our children and community. That is to provide them the best, most cost-effective, and safest educational environment. We must also be open and transparent in our communication to all before, during, and after our activities. This community forum is a means to do exactly that, communicate and inform. But did you ever think, who is the school board? And that's a pretty good question. We are just like all of you. We are Conval community residents. Some are retired, some are semi-retired, and some are employed full-time. We live in the Conval community, we raise our children here, we pay taxes just like you do, and we enjoy living here. We, your school board, give freely of our time, energy, and knowledge to work for the Conval school community. We are your neighbors and are here to serve the Conval community because we feel it is our obligation to provide needed leadership for our children and community, and to do the best job possible to ensure we provide the best and safe educational environment at the right cost. That is who your school board is. 13 community members just like you. More importantly, what are our responsibilities? From the New Hampshire School Board Association. The role of the school board is not to run the schools, but to see that they are run well. There's a big difference on that. Set and establish school board policy, establish the school district's budget, and provide budget oversight. Hire and evaluate the superintendent. Conduct hearings and serve as an adjudicative body, participate in collective bargaining, communicate with the public to keep the public informed of board actions, strategic planning, long and short-term goals. Running a school system like Conval is a daunting job, and we are fortunate to have as our superintendent, Dr. Kimberly Rizzo Saunders. Think of it, superintendent does equal CEO. Major $56 million plus diverse organization subject to many rules and regulations of the federal, state, and local authorities. 11 separate school locations, a central office, the SAU, and everyday customer population of almost 2,000 students, 9 different communities to integrate into one cohesive approach and direction. Diverse staff, many individual needs, constant funding sources. It's unlike any other organization, especially ones that I've been involved with. The complexity is amazing. It is not a 9-to-5 job. The school board relationship with the superintendent is also unique. Other industries have boards that meet once a month or once a quarter. Here, the school board and superintendent interact constantly, almost daily. Do we always agree? Nah, but that is good. Different opinions and approaches equal well thought out and executed activities. Now to the project and forum. The forum is totally dedicated to sharing information about one of the most important fact-filled, emotionally charged activities that will face this community: consolidation, reconfiguration. One of the most important questions asked is, why are we doing this project? Simple, because you, the community, told us to. Yes, we do not take this project on because we had nothing better to do. We were told to do this project. In a warrant article presented by the community, by a community member, not a board member or Conval employee, we were charged with the task of require that the school board submit to the Conval School District voters for their approval a comprehensive analysis and implementation plan detailing the financial, education, and social impacts of any school closure that might have on both students and towns prior to proposing to voters any plan for a school closure in the Conval School District. This warrant article was voted in the affirmative by 78% of the community voters. So the school board undertook this task at the direction of the community. Our commitment to the community was to be as open and transparent as possible and involve the community. We determined up front that in order to meet this community objective, we would engage a non-biased, experienced firm to assist us in this project. Through our RFI and RFP process, that's request for information and request for proposal process, we selected a firm that met our need criteria. That firm is Prismatic Services. They have done a great job and have met all of our requirements in this phase of the project. Notice I said phase. That is because this project is not over. Only the data gathering and report production phase is. The next phase of this project, which ends with the community vote on our recommendation, concludes on March 12, 2024. It is up to the community to accept or reject our recommendation through a warrant article. And these points are very important to understand. We, the board, undertook the project at the direction of the community. We engaged an outside firm. And I have to flip a page. Here we go. Only a phase of the project is done. The community has 3 months going forward to completely absorb the board recommendation, the warrant article, interact with the board through meetings and communications, completely digest the Prismatic report, and vote on acceptance of the warrant article. The vote by the community is March 12th, that's 2024. Meetings with the community will be scheduled and communicated. This is not the only meeting we're going to have. This is the end of one phase. There are going to be more meetings that we will have with the community. And think about openness, transparency, and community involvement. Prismatic Service has done a great job in gathering information from the community, school board, Conval administration, and staff, and focus sessions with students in the correct age category. They have held individual town meetings, online surveys, and online forums to get as much diverse input as possible. Is it a short time frame and did we rush it? No. Remember, we have been active in this project starting in June of this year and months prior to that for planning and selection purposes. There are 3 more months in this project prior to the community vote. Within these 3 months, there is ample opportunity to completely digest the report and information, to attend meetings so as to have informed voting take place. Things to note. How is this forum organized? Like previous forums, we have a presentation. For this one, we have one presentation scheduled. It is being done by Dr. Tasha Prito, President of Prismatic Services. The presentation will be immediately followed by question and answer period where community folks will have the opportunity to ask questions. Almost done. Make comments and receive replies. Both Dr. Frito and our superintendent, Dr. Kimberly Saunders, will respond to questions. We will alternate the questions from the in-house and online audience to give each a fair chance to be heard. The online questions will be submitted by email with the email address of forum@conval.edu. Online questions will be organized for discussion and presented one at a time to Dr. Prito. Dr. Prito will either answer the question or give it to Dr. Kimberly Saunders to answer. In-house questioners will be selected one at a time, given a microphone, and invited to stand up to present their question. And we do need you to take the microphone because the online audience has to hear what's going on. This process will continue until there's no more questions or we run out of extended time for questions. Our upcoming meetings with the community will give ample time for all questions to be heard and answered. If the question and answers take place longer than scheduled, we will extend the Q&A period and forum end time to accommodate the remaining questions. Flexibility. I want to sincerely thank all of the folks that have been involved in organizing this community forum, both for the presentation, question and answers, and all stage folks. Special thanks to Mark Schaub, District Systems Administrator, for putting together all the audiovisual equipment and communications infrastructure for this and previous forums. Also, thanks to all of you, the folks behind the scenes that have made this forum possible. Lastly, but probably most important, our audience for taking of your time to join us in this important event. Remember, if at any time you want to relive this experience, it is on the Conval YouTube channel. Access information is on the Conval website and in all of our communications. You can also share this link with others who were not able to attend while the forum was live. Lastly, we ask that all interactions to be civil. You want to be remembered for what you say and not how you act. Remember, we are all Conval. I'd like to introduce Dr. Tasha Rito, President of Prismatic.
Change over technology here. Yes, it works. All right. Good evening, members of the board, superintendent, district staff, and community members. I'm Dr. Tasha Prieto, President of Prismatic Services and manager of the project team for the reconfiguration study. Here's what I'd like to cover in the next 45 minutes. Let me turn on that. Okay. Essentially, I want to cover what we did in this study, some hard facts we all need to acknowledge, some other conclusions, our reconfiguration recommendation, some implementation suggestions, estimated fiscal impact, and then a final thought. Here we go. Let's try that. So Prismatic's objectives on this project were the objectives outlined in the district's RFP. I've included the RFP language on this slide. That's why they're in italics, because they're not my words. First, we were to evaluate the consolidation of district schools while considering multiple aspects. Then, the RFP required a whole lot of other components: neutrality, community involvement, and specific recommendations. The RFP posed this question: what is best for Conval students and taxpayers? The answer to that question is what I and my team have been exploring since July of this year when we were hired. To accomplish this work, we provided a team of 7 consultants and 5 analysts. Principals met with Dr. Stacy Williams, who is herself a former principal, as well as a teacher and district administrator. Dr. Williams reviewed regular education on this project. Dr. Gary Gerber is a former district superintendent who began his career in special education. He was responsible for special education on this project and also assisted in helping to craft the final recommendation. Mr. Tom Martineau is an architect with worldwide architectural consulting experience and a professor emeritus at Florida A&M University. Not surprisingly, he was responsible for evaluating Conval facilities. Mr. Jerry Williams is a CPA with a long history of managing school district performance reviews. He was responsible for looking at Conval's finances. Last were Ms. Donna Whitrock and Mr. Doug Carter. Ms. Whitrock is a former school food service director and also past president of the National School Nutrition Association. And Mr. Carter is a former school transportation director and also a former history teacher. They were responsible for, not surprisingly, reviewing food services and transportation respectively. Then on this side, we have the 5 Prismatic analysts who assisted in hosting the 9 town meetings Prismatic held to gather community input for this project. Our timeline for this project has been busy. We started in July with an initial site visit and the start of data collection. Mr. Martineau completed on-site assessments of each school facility in August. In September, we reviewed food services, transportation, technology, regular education, and special education. We also launched the community staff and student surveys and held the first 6 town meetings. In October, we held the last 3 town meetings, then launched a follow-up community survey and online forum. We held a data party in November with school board members and district leadership, and we're now in the reporting stage, December, which will wrap up Prismatic's work on this project. As part of this project, we asked for community input in a wide variety of activities, and you, the community, came through. We collected data from the district in response to an initial data request of 96 items, then additional data items as the study progressed. District staff provided 248 items in response to the initial data request. We interviewed all school board members. We heard from staff via 20 different interviews, 9 focus groups, and staff-specific questions on the September survey. We also heard from students. We did 6 focus groups with them and received 201 responses to their survey. We visited the schools 58 separate times, not including the visits for town meetings, covering all schools and typically including short informal interviews with principals or other staff that we came across. We also heard from the community at large. The September survey received 1,555 responses, including 483 parent responses, 138 staff responses, and sufficient responses from each of the 9 towns for analysis. The October parent community survey received 405 responses, including sufficient responses from some of the 9 towns for separate analysis. Also in October, we hosted an online forum that received 69 individual comments and questions, plus a whole bunch of emojis indicating agreement and disagreement that I didn't bother to tally up. We also met with many of you in person. Across the 9 town meetings, we had a total of 472 participants, and that did not include various official school board members and town selectmen that came in. Finally, across all the activities, Prismatic, we spent a total of 60 days on site, which was beyond the number of days we actually thought we were going to spend and what we included in our proposal. So we gathered a lot of data, did a lot of assessing Conval schools, and heard from a lot of community constituents. Through this work, we came up against 2 hard facts that weighed on our reconfigure recommendation, and I'd like to go through them with you. First hard fact has to do with enrollment. The belief that they will come is unfortunately just not supported by available data. Multiple international agencies have predicted that some of us, maybe our children, maybe our grandchildren, are likely to live long enough to see something that has not happened in human history as far as we know. Sometime between 2064 and 2086, the global human population will begin to shrink and then decline. And if I'm the first person telling you this, my apologies, but this is fact. This graph shows various UN projections, and you can see the various lines. Let me see if I can highlight them for you. You can, well, maybe I can't. All right, so they've got a red line, a yellow line, and a blue line. Those are different projections from different agencies. One is projecting in 2064 a global population peak at 9.7 billion. The blue line, solid line that's higher, is predicting a peak at 2.48 billion in 2086. So obviously, this has huge implications for everything. It has huge implications for all kinds of societal constructs, but it can be difficult to wrap our minds around because it's the first time this has ever happened as far as we know, right? You think about the plague wiped out about 1/3 of the population in the European areas, but we're turning a corner. So if we go from the global to the national, different data source, the U.S. Congressional Budget Office, or the CBO, is projecting population growth in the United States over the next 30 years. So there is some growth. But what they're projecting is, in my words, anemic. They project that the U.S. will only grow at 1/3 the rate at which it grew between 1983 and 2022. And this is significant for New Hampshire, the majority of the growth in the next several decades will be due to net in-migration, not birth rates. So we zoom down a little further from the national to the local. The New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs is projecting population growth through 2035 for the Conval area. But as you can see, by 2035, the net gain is going to be just 984 people. And no, the 8 is for projected growth for Dublin is not a typo. That is what they are projecting. Overall, the state agency is projecting just a 5.2% growth rate over 15 years, and the clock started on that in 2020. Okay. If we use the rough measure here that about 19,000 people overall, 18,900, so the 19,000 people overall resulted in 2,066 students in 2020. The additional 984 people are going to give us about an additional 107 students by 2035. Okay. A few more numbers. We can go a little bit more local. NESDEC is a New England nonprofit that provides student enrollment projections for districts in the whole New England area. It's the go-to source that school districts use for their enrollment projections. Through 2031, which is the very last bar here closest to me, NESDEC projected a 10-year enrollment gain of 184 students over 2021, and that's K-12. So 13 grades from K to 12. That means an average of 14 students per grade district-wide. Note that none of the data on this or any of the 3 previous slides were developed by Prismatic. These are all external sources, and they all point in the same direction. It is unlikely that they will come. Second hard fact that we had to deal with in this study is excess capacity. Depending on the method used, Conval has space for between 1,540 and 1,623 students across its 8 elementary schools. Okay? Conval has more space than it is likely to need. Here's some more data to back that up. The first column of numbers here is the New Hampshire Department of Education capacity according to maximums that they allow. New Hampshire Department of Education allows you to calculate max capacity for a school depending on 2 different factors, looking at square footage per student, looking at number of students per classroom. So we did both ways and then took the lower number because you can't violate either one of those. The second column of numbers was taken by counting up how many classrooms there are in each school, subtracting 1 out for some other use, probably a special education classroom or something like that, and then multiplying it by 20 students per classroom. The last column is the total enrollment in each school in 2022-23. So NESDEC projects that K-4 enrollment in Conval in 2031-32 will be 798. Okay? This means that Conval has roughly twice as much elementary space as it will have students in the near future. Continuing to offer pre-K or expanding pre-K will fill some of those empty seats, but it will not fill all. And for those of you who are wondering, what if Conval decides that 17 students per class is best? I did the math. That results in 1,309. If 15 students per class is decided to be the max, that would be 1,115. Both are still above the number of elementary students that you will see, projected to see in 2030, 31, 32. Beyond those 2 hard facts, we wrestled with some additional relevant conclusions. These are detailed in Chapter 5 of the report, but I'm going to cover most of them here briefly. First, the Conval situation is unusual. The 1967 Articles of Agreement essentially handcuffed the school board in regard to elementary schools. In most districts, the disposition of school facilities is subject to school board vote, not popular vote. I know that this kind of arrangement happens here in New Hampshire. It's happened, and I've looked at several other articles of agreement in other districts, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. The 1967 agreement has created a situation where a Conval elementary school can decline an enrollment to just a handful of students or even truly no students, and the district has no recourse. It must keep that school open. until a popular vote allows it to be closed. In highly rural areas, and we work in a ton of them, extremely small schools are sometimes the only option you have. It's 2 hours to the next pocket of population to find people, to have students. Conval is not so highly rural and should have other options. Continuing to maintain facilities it is unlikely to need has a cost for Conval. There are real costs in terms of facilities maintenance and various types of staffing. There are opportunity costs in terms of what is not offered to secondary students in particular. There are opportunity costs in terms of what the district can offer for teacher salaries, as another example. Although moving additional grades to the existing 8 elementary schools was palatable to a portion of Conval residents, we got that in surveys, we got that in town meetings. This would be, for example, creating pre-K 6 schools. They're not the best option educationally or academically. Extremely small numbers of students in each grade would be the result, and research does not support that as a best practice for student learning. Moreover, based on the capacities of the 8 elementary schools and the projected enrollments, most of them would still have excess space. We don't solve our problem that way, although I tried. Some other conclusions. The current 8 schools are not equitable in a number of areas. We looked at this hard, and just, to give you some insight into how the consulting world works, we first thought, well, all right, let's find which schools are falling apart, and then, decision made, right? We didn't find inequities in facilities. We did find some inequities in food service offerings, variations in class sizes, some field trip inequity. We also found some inequity in staffing and student support services. This year, Antrim is the only elementary school with a full-time reading interventionist, for example. Peterborough is the only school with a full-time counselor. Only 4 of the elementary schools have full-time nurses. So there's inequities like that. Extremely small class size has not been shown to result in outsized performance on state assessments. This is shown in Chapter 2, starting on page 210, looking at the Conval elementary schools compared to each other, and then looking at Conval compared to peer districts in New Hampshire. Research supports the benefits of smaller class sizes. Make sure I'm saying this correctly. Research supports the benefits of smaller class sizes, 15 to 20, not extremely small class sizes. One of the first studies on class size was completed in the 1980s. Project STAR was done in Tennessee. It's the study that most people start when they start talking about, oh, see, small class sizes work. Project STAR absolutely found some modest gains in student achievement with smaller class sizes. But this is where you have to go from reading the title and reading the abstract to reading the full report. The Project STAR researchers defined small class sizes as 13 to 17 students, and regular ones, as 20 to 25 students. Okay, and they found improvements going from 20 to 25 students down to 13 to 17 students. Later research that looked at the STAR project again came up with some methodological concerns, but most people, when they start talking about class sizes, that's the first one they look at. More recent research has also found some modest positive effects on student achievement from smaller class sizes, but they generally start from a definition of small as being at least 10 students in the classroom. Finally, class size is not a magic bullet. In a ranking by researchers, reducing class size was ranked 186th out of 252 ways to impact student achievement. There are way more important ways to impact student achievement than small class size. Collective teacher efficacy, teacher quality, solid curriculum, great instructional strategies were each ranked higher in terms of their impact on student achievement. And if you want to get the details and the footnotes on the class size research, that's on page 4.1 of our report. Another conclusion. Of the district's current budget, 83% is allocated to salaries and benefits, Benefits in 2023-24 are equal to about 50% of salaries. If you're not in the public sector, you don't necessarily notice that. But this does not include salaries and benefits for things that the district is outsourced: transportation, food service, and custodial workers. So at this level, 83% of the budget is staff. At this level, Conval is approaching a budgeting danger zone where we're spending so much on staffing that there's little funding left for other things like supplies, resources, repairs, new initiatives, new curriculum, new textbooks, new library books, those kinds of things. It's a fine line we need to walk there. Just a few more conclusions. Currently, middle school and high school students had mixed opinions regarding their experiences in Conval. They were not strong supporters for maintaining the smaller elementary schools they just left. I met with middle schoolers as well as 9th and 10th graders. In the middle school focus groups, those who attended a Conval elementary school other than Antrim or Peterborough noted that class sizes were, quote, kind of small, end quote, and that sometimes this was a good thing and sometimes it was not a good thing. In their words, quote, everyone got to know each other, end quote, but also, quote, you wished you had more people. When you were stuck with the same kids for 4 years, it gets boring, end quote. One said that having a separate school with 8 kids in a class, quote, doesn't make any sense, end quote. Those who attended Antrim Elementary School characterized it as, quote, a small school, end quote. Their words, not mine. These and other middle school focus group comments begin on page 37 of our report. In the high school focus groups, those who attended Antrim and Peterborough elementary schools liked the larger sizes of those schools. There were, quote, more chances to make friends, end quote, and they had, quote, had more friends, end quote. Among those who attended the smaller elementary schools, one said, quote, no matter how hard you try, there would still be kids left out, end quote. These and other high school focus group comments begin on page 39 in the report. When I asked the middle school kids how they would feel about merging some elementary schools together, the consensus of the 5th and 6th grade groups was negative, but not for the reasons you might think. They didn't start talking about, oh, we're going to lose our small school. They were worried about a lack of space in a combined elementary school, and they really posed that as a question. Would there be enough space to fit all of us in? And whether teachers would lose their jobs. Among the 7th and 8th graders, there was no consensus in one of the groups I did. The other group said it would be okay to merge. They were fine with it. When I asked the high school students how they would feel about merging some elementary schools together, they were more open-minded about it than negative. One said that in a merged elementary school, quote, academics would be better, end quote. They, quote, wouldn't have to learn with kids that aren't at your level, end quote. Another said, quote, combining schools would definitely not be a bad idea, end quote. These and other comments are on page 311 of the report. On the student survey, when asked to name the best part of their elementary school experience, middle schoolers most frequently named specific teachers or staff members, followed by friends. High school students most frequently named some kind of activity. Small school size was not explicitly the top response, nor was it the second response. It was not the thing that they remembered as being best about their school. There are more details on the student focus groups and survey results in Chapter 3, as well as Appendix A. And here I'll dive off into a little bit about the report. The appendices are all the words of everybody in the community. Appendix A has the student survey results, followed by appendices for each one of the surveys, the community forums, as well as the online forum and the data party. Next, we concluded that the Conval community has some appetite for change. Historically, however, it has not embraced change. The community and the district have been debating reconfiguration for at least a decade, but has not taken action. This factor weighed heavily on my team and led Prismatic to ultimately recommend a smaller reconfiguration recommendation than some would perhaps consider ideal. This leads us to our reconfiguration recommendation. Before I go into specifics, I'd like to address one allegation given to us and almost from the beginning of the project. No, we did not start this project with conclusions already made. No one on the Prismatic teams lives in the Conval area. We have no vested interest in the outcomes of this project. In this project, we examined at least a dozen options, including the possibility that doing nothing was the best answer to the question, what is best for Conval students and taxpayers? Page 5.2 of the report lists the options we worked through. In the end, we came to this recommendation as the best answer to the question. 1, we recommend that the board leave middle school and high school as is. As with the elementary schools, yes, there is excess space in the 2 middle schools and the high school. However, because the Conval community appears to have a low appetite for change, We ultimately decided not to make a recommendation in this area. 2, we recommend that the board request voter approval to close 4 elementary schools: Pierce, DCS, FES, and TES. We selected these specific schools based on geodemographics and capacity within the schools. Taking these 4 schools out of service would reduce the gap between the space available and the projected student enrollment by around 500 students. It would allow the district to provide a better learning environment for elementary students and to reap some cost savings in a number of areas. Of these 2 benefits, I would emphasize that Prismatic's first concern was what is best for students. Saving money was a secondary concern. In order to earn voter approval and also improve the education environment in Conval, we recommended that the board concurrently commit to a couple of things. Provide families with options. This would be provide elementary families of the former schools with options. Former Pierce and FES students could choose to enroll in AES or GES. Former DCS students could choose to enroll in HES or PES. Former TES students could choose to enroll in GES or PES. So in each case, if you're paying attention, students in the former schools could opt for one of the remaining smaller schools or one of the larger, but still small, elementary schools. Next, we recommend that the board commit to before and after school programming in at least Antrim and Peterborough elementary schools. This should be available to all students who attend those schools. It should be free to families that qualify for free reduced meals, and the board and district should work it out to price it at break even for the rest of them. We want an affordable option for before and after school programming for families. Finally, we recommend that the board commit to expanding secondary options that have been neglected by beginning to offer world languages in middle school. I had someone at a town forum come up and go, we have world languages in middle school. The actual tense is wrong there. We don't have right now. Then we're recommending beyond that we expand high school options beyond the current languages that you have. So a few notes about how we recommend you implement this change. First, not lay anyone off. While this will mean that the district will not reap all the staff savings right away, layoffs or risks create a negative environment. Instead, the district should let the normal course of its regular attrition patterns, people retiring, people moving out of the district and leaving their jobs here, to lead it to the right staff size. Second, no one gets laid off. No, this isn't a typo. I saw the teacher layoffs was a concern raised in the December 4th board meeting, so I thought I'd better say it twice for everyone to hear. Third, and this one's important, we encourage the district to plan for a 3-year timeline. In our experience, hasty changes in a school district are often less successful than more deliberate ones. Remember, it's a large organization with a lot of staff, a lot of students, and a lot of moving parts. A change such as this one requires thought, planning, and coordination. It is better to move slowly and deliberately to the goal than to try to do it all in 6 months. Oops, back it up. So year 1 of that timeline, 24-25, which is not this school year, but next school year, is for planning. Of the 3 years, year 1 has the most things to be accomplished, believe it or not. That's the big work. Page 5.5 of our report includes a list of the major activities that the district needs to complete in year 1. It includes renegotiating a whole bunch of contracts. It includes meeting with town members to talk about what we will do with the facilities that are no longer needed as schools, renegotiating the transportation contract, renegotiating the food services contract, deciding, how we will merge the schools, what culture and activities will be kept between the schools, what will we bring from the old to the new, those kinds of things. Year 2 is when Conval moves from 8 to 4 elementary schools. It's also when before and after school programming and expanded world languages would begin. Year 3 is a year of refining implementation, assessing success, and looking at possibilities for further improvements. Awesome. As for our estimated fiscal impact, a few notes about it. So prismatic policy is to always seek to be conservative in estimating costs. What does this mean? If we have a range of savings, we will take the lowest range of that savings. If we have a range of costs, we will take the highest possible cost. That keeps us conservative. There are some places where we didn't make an estimate, but we know there are some savings there, such as technology and what could happen with the allocation of special education paraprofessionals once there are some larger groupings of elementary students in schools. That said, we estimate a savings of 2.4 million to 4.0 million annually by reconfiguring from 8 to 4 elementary schools. Here's the breakdown provided in Chapter 5 of the report. We have savings in teaching positions, principal positions, and special education positions. Then we have facilities savings from no longer having to maintain, clean, or improve 4 elementary schools. We have some savings from reduced food services costs and some improvement in meal participation. Finally, we anticipate some additional costs in terms of bus routes. There are a lot of variables at play in how transportation will work out with the reconfiguration. We could change how we do some of the bus routes. One of the things that we think could save you substantial transportation dollars is looking at different school start times. But to be safe, we added in 3 bus routes over what you currently do to help make sure routes remain at about the same ride time as they currently are. All of these savings combined with the transportation costs get us to a conservative estimate of 2.6 million in annual savings. So why are we giving you a range? We get to the 2.4 million figure by assuming the addition of 2 middle school teachers to offer a world language to get us started there. We get to the 4.0 million by looking at what we think is likely possible through additional special education efficiencies, some additional avoided capital expenditures, and possibly some overall savings in transportation. So for example, instead of additional costs, if the district opts to move school start times, adopts a transportation depot network, or makes some other changes, transportation savings are possible. Whoops. Yeah, I'm going to run through that whole thing again. Sorry. First 3 rows are the position savings. The next 2 rows are facility savings. Next row, minus 4 elementary schools, reduced food services costs, and increased food service participation, and the 3 bus routes. So there it's all broken down. My apologies. I thought it flipped. All right. So a final thought. The committee in 1967 was not seeking just to save money. They were focused on educational quality. Here are some quotes from the 1967 agreement. The district was created as, quote, the most efficient and economical means to raise quality to the highest standard possible, end quote. The 1967 committee recognized that, quote, more and more, towns like ours are finding cooperation, pooling of resources, the only answer to the problem of giving their children the schools they need without placing intolerable burdens on their taxpayers, end quote. In this project, Prismatic has also been focused on educational quality. At the end of the day, Prismatic's recommendation reconfiguration will directly impact only about 210 people in this district. That's the number of students in the 4 elementary schools we recommend be reconfigured. Yes, they would travel to another town for elementary school, but we believe the educational benefits will be worth it. About another 1,730 people will also feel some impacts. That's the number of the rest of the students in the district. They will have opportunities for increased social interactions in classrooms. The district may be able to give their teachers higher wages. There will be language opportunities in the middle schools. The rest of the community residents may be unhappy about making a change. I get that. Change is hard. Some may be happy about a potential tax break. I submit to the board and the superintendent that neither of these factors should be most important in their decision making. It is rather about what is best for students. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain questions.
My name is Gary Gorski. I'm on the Peterborough Planning Board. I don't speak for the planning board, but it gives you my perspective. If there is one thing that you take away from this presentation, the hard facts and the fact that that population table was included in this report, is that the people who wrote this report have absolutely no understanding of whatsoever of the population, of what the population will look like in our towns. That report says that 463 people will move to Peterborough over the next 27 years. The population of Peterborough in 2020 was 6,418. The population of Peterborough by the end of 2025 will be over 7,250 people. There will be more than 800 more people in Peterborough in 2 years than there were 5 years ago. I'm on the planning board. The only way you can ever there's only one way to understand the population. There's only one way to understand the population and enrollment that will happen, and that is to understand the local economy and the local housing market. We have an absolutely booming local economy. We have an absolutely booming housing market. 10% of all the housing that exists in Peterborough will be built in the next 2 years. And it's not just Peterborough where this is going to happen. The vacancy rate across the entirety of Conval is below 1% everywhere. Now, think about this. I want to correct this number because this was put in this report. A bunch of you might be wondering, why is Dublin supposed to only get 8 people? Why is Dublin losing 78 people when every other town in Conval is going to gain people? Here's what it is. It's a statistical mirage. The report, and I spoke to the author of the state population projection report to ask him questions. I've spent more than 100 hours over the past month putting this information together. That report, the reason that it shows that for Dublin is because Dublin is in Cheshire County and every other town is in Hillsborough. The way the population projection is done is that the state makes an assumption about how fast each county will grow and then makes an equation and that spits out a number for each town. It's an invisible line on the map, and that means Dublin shrinks and every other town grows. It means nothing. It has nothing to do with the local economy. It has nothing to do with the local housing market. The amount of housing that will be built in Peterborough in the next 2 years is equivalent to 44% of all the housing that exists in Dublin. There are only 2 houses for sale all in Dublin. People want to live there. Does anyone honestly think that that we're going to build a literal Dublin in Peterborough? We're doing it. We're halfway there in 5 years. That no one is going to build a house in Dublin or move there? The population across this entire district is going to grow. The state population projection report talks about the fact that rural areas are increasingly popular for young families. My own neighborhood, every single family that has moved into my neighborhood in recent weeks, since I bought there 5 years ago, has a parent that works remotely. Our local companies, the thing is, this is all things that should be known when this report is written. A whole step was skipped. There should have been an entire report that only talks about the local economic and housing situation. And that tells you whether you need to even do any of this. We did the survey of local company job openings is absolutely massive. There are companies here it threatens their very viability that they can't hire more workers, and they're thinking about busing people in just to get more people here because there's no housing available. We are booming. The only thing in Peterborough that we need to worry about is our school big enough to hold the kids of Peterborough? In Peterborough, I talked to the administrator. They told me they're using every inch of the building to educate students. I have 5-year-old twins. I drive every day from Peterborough to Hancock because the capacity of Peterborough pre-K was full. They told me that. They said the state law limits how many kids you can put in this room. The pre-K has 27 kids across the 2 classes. And so they said, we might not have enough room. And they sent me up there. I don't understand the population projection report. The population projections are absurd. The enrollment report is 2 years old. That NESDEC, they usually put out a new report every October. The district didn't even get one this year. I asked for it. They don't have it. They did not even get the report this year to update the population projections. A 2-year-old enrollment projection that takes into account nothing about what is happening in our town and our economy is meaningless. Peterborough is probably if not the fastest growing town in the state over the next 2 years. It's all absurd to me. And I want to do one more thing. I'll sit down. I'll let other people talk. I want to make one point of basic math. And this is for the people of Greenfield and the people of Francistown. So chapter 5, simple scenario based on June 2023 enrollment statistics where all former Francistown students would choose to attend Greenfield. Chapter 4 states the capacity of Greenfield Elementary as 7 classrooms, 8 total rooms with the quote subtraction of 1 classroom per facility for non-education use. So I looked at the combined June 2023 enrollment data for Francistown and Greenfield. Under Conval class size standards, pre-K, combined numbers, 25 children, 2 rooms. Kindergarten, 20 children, 2 rooms, because Conval class size standard is 15 to 18. First grade, 19 kids, 1 room. Second grade, 30 students, 2 rooms. Third grade, 21, 1 room. Fourth grade, 23, 2 rooms. That's 10. So you combine the 2 schools, you need 10 rooms, and according to the Prismatic report, there are only 7 rooms available. So I literally don't even understand from reading the report under the current enrollment how it even works. It doesn't fit. My kids are in pre-K. They're going to be going to Peterborough Elementary for the next 5 years. I don't want my kids in 3rd and 4th grade sitting in a trailer we've parked behind the building because we have 400 kids in Dublin Elementary. It is. I worked to get elected to the planning board, and if this gets voted through, it'll be an absolute disgrace. I will spend every minute I have for the next 3 months working to get the people of Peterborough to vote this down. Thank you.
So if I understand correctly, we're supposed to respond to questions before the next question is asked. So Superintendent, would you like to take a piece of responding to that question?
I didn't actually hear a question.
Was there a question? I have a couple of responses to some of the comments. So I guess, and question for you, Superintendent, in your experience, how off are the NESDEC projections for the school district's enrollments?
Okay, so I don't know that he was talking about the school district enrollments.
He
Mr.
did mention the
Gorski.
NESDEC report.
You did mention
specifically.
the NESDEC report, but I don't think you were, I think you were talking more about, that's what I thought. Great.
I only point to the NESDEC because the NESDEC report cited the NESDEC population projection. The NESDEC enrollment projections cited in the report are from November 2021. We don't have 2023 one.
I thought they were from 20, the ones you used, I'm sorry, go ahead, please finish.
2021. The district has
22.
2022. That's not in the report.
Yep.
There's no 2023. My point is that you should not. Even if you get into NESDEC, what it says, the only way to understand enrollment is population. The only way to understand population is an in-depth study of your local economy and your local housing market. If you don't know that, you don't have it. You can't just take one report. You can't put one number and say population. You need to spend months. You need to interview the planning board in every town. You need to talk to the planning board members about zoning. You need to know how housing is being built. That's what needs to be done.
Thank you. Could you repeat your question?
So
'Cause
my
I'm not
question
sure.
to you is, in your experience, how off are the
Okay.
NESDEC projections for Conval?
So I have been in the district for 15 years. This is my 15th year. I've spent the first 7 as the assistant superintendent, and the last, however much longer, as 8, as the superintendent. What I can tell you is from my experience, and there was a section of time where we didn't use NESDEC, just to be clear, but they are usually within 15 to 20 students. They use a proprietary demography. So I can't tell you their exact formula. What I do know is they concentrate on children. So they are not necessarily looking at some of the things that Mr. Gorski has spoken about, but they do look very specifically at birth, cohort survival, as well as student in-migration and out-migration, particularly around vouchers, around private schools, and around just people with children not moving into the district. So those are what they are looking at. They are not, just to be really clear, although it is proprietary, so I'm not 100% sure, but they're not necessarily looking at some of the things Mr. Gorski spoke about. They look at school populations. They look at school populations for thousands of schools in the greater New England and Northeast area.
Okay. And so there actually is a page in the NESDEC report that includes building starts and history on building starts and for single families and multitudes. And so it is somehow part of their algorithm. I have a couple of pieces to add to that. This was not intended to be a demographic study. If you want a demographic study, you hire demography firms. I know a couple of them that are great, and they do exactly what he talked about doing. When we started this project, I asked the district, do you feel that you have good projections for where we're going? Because population is obviously one of the big concerns. It's one of the key variables in this question. The district felt that it had good population student enrollment projections for Conval from NESDEC. And then I'm going to take a minute to talk about a couple of other pieces that he said. And this is ancient history to you all. But in 1985, this district commissioned a study from a group at a well-known prestigious university up here in the Northeast that looked at growth. And I read that study twice and took a lot of notes on it because I thought it was very instructive for what can happen. And I've seen this before in other districts. I understand that it can be very difficult to say, you know what, we might not be growing. It's way more happy to say we are growing. And so the 1985 study at that time looked at population projections and, you know, no fault of anybody's that's sitting in this room, but that consulting group said that 6 of your elementary schools would be beyond capacity by 1995. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I went through and read it and tried to figure out how did they get to coming to, you know, looking at the data that they're looking at, how did they get to this? And it was, I can only conclude, some rosy thinking. I do think it is possible that projections can be wrong. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. But I also know that plans do not equal houses necessarily. It may happen, it may not happen. That's why you have to consider a lot of other factors. And so, again, I've seen it happen in other districts. We say they will come. This district has had excess capacity for a long time in these schools. I asked multiple people, I asked board members, why did we build these schools as large as they are? And we had no real good reason other than optimism at the time. And what that's created are schools that are larger than you need. And that becomes a burden because that has a cost. In terms of every inch, that was your comment about every inch of space is being used. I absolutely agree that every space is being used in some capacity in every school that you have. Is it the best use of space? Not necessarily. Is it a compact and efficient use of space? No. It is a rule. Teachers will expand to fill the space available. There are spaces available for office space, but we're using classrooms instead because we have that available. And I see that not just in Conval, I see that in other places. You know, we start to run out of students, the principal's office becomes a former classroom. Those kinds of things happen. In terms of how to allocate, you did bring up a good point on that one, and I did run the numbers. I think what you were assuming is that, I can't remember which one it was, but you were assuming that if one of the schools, I think Francistown to Greenfield, you were assuming that all Francistown children would go to Greenfield. That was your example. No, we said to give them a choice. Yeah. Okay. Francistown has a choice to go to Antrim or Greenfield. If we do that, if all Francistown students, let me make sure I get this right, go to Greenfield, yes, we would have a space problem. I'm not denying that. I don't think that will happen though. And I think that what is left up to the board, no, Bennington, correct. And I added all of those together and we end up with overcapacity. If that is assuming that no one chooses to go to Antrim, okay? I don't think that would happen. I think that some of them would choose to go to Antrim. I also think that it is up to the board to decide to accept the recommendation or not. Remember, I'm making a recommendation, the board needs to vote on it. I think this is the best possible solution for a situation y'all have lived with for a very long time. And I think that was all the pieces. Do we take an online question now? Yes? Yeah, let me see if I can get to it. Which one do you want me to do? Ann. So what additional services will students who currently attend small schools receive if the district closes some elementary schools? So it's a good question. So we've pointed out in a couple of places where the smaller schools don't necessarily receive all the same services. They don't necessarily have the same number of minutes for some of their specials. One of the comments among middle school students, I don't have it off the top of my head what the exact quote was, that they were pointing out how because of the way specials are done in some of the smaller schools, they do something like art for a couple of weeks and then they forget about it for a month and a half before art comes back around. We'd have the opportunity to have a more regular special schedule with those students. We would have the opportunity with larger class sizes in the reconfigured schools to be able to potentially offer higher teacher salaries. That's something that's been on the table and something that I think that the district ought to look at because that is impacting your ability to recruit and retain teachers. We would also potentially be able to have things like, I went through multiple of the small schools at a time during the regular course of the doing observations. And I'm nosy. I went around and took a look at what was going on in the library. No librarian on staff. No way for Johnny, who's sitting in the classroom, who's kind of bored, or maybe he needs, a little bit of a break from the classroom. He can't go down to the library in your smaller schools because there's no one there. And so things like that, I think, would be improved. I do think there is a lot to be said for having classrooms of a decent enough size so that you have multiple opportunities for friends. And one last piece on this one from this lady's question. I'm not going to name names on this, but this was one of my observations. I went into a classroom that was fairly small. There were 6 students of a gender and 2 students of the other gender. They were doing different projects, different stations within there. And the 2 students of the one gender were assigned to read a book together. And so the one student reads one page and the other student reads the other page. And I think this is a good example of what can happen in a smaller school environment. These 2 students were the only students of that gender in the classroom, okay? They wanted to be together, right? And one student was very much on grade level. I'd say probably above grade level. I'm listening to them read. The other student was well below grade level. I can hear it. And I can hear the other student doing a wonderful job, helping this other student out, helping to correct pronunciation, helping the student to pronounce words, doing a great job, right? So nothing wrong there. But I left thinking, where is the challenge for the one student who's already fluent? Where is the other person in the class to help challenge that student forward? And those are the kinds of things that we miss out on. So now we go this way? Okay.
My name's John Foisley. I'm from Temple, father of 6. This is my little one here. So I have a question first off for the school, the district. There are, how many schools in the district have the pre-K?
4.
Okay, and so the 4 that have been chosen for closing don't have.
I did not make the recommendation.
I'm just
Right.
asking. Those
So
are the
you
4.
would have to, that's a question that you would address. It's not
But-
my report,
Oh,
so.
but I'm
But
asking
yes, so
because you,
the 4 that she put up
Right.
do not they do not have pre-K. That is true.
okay, so were the pre-Ks counted in the numbers for the schools that they're in?
Yes.
Okay, so why is it that all the schools have not been given the pre-K?
That's a district question.
Okay,
I can
Sorry.
I can absolutely answer that question. So when the places, and this was something that came up 2 years, I believe it was 2 years ago. Didn't that happen? Somebody that we see frequently brought that up. And the selection for the pre-Ks were done based on the largest population of the students that we were trying to make sure were served. So, for instance, if we had put a pre-K in Temple,
which could have served
yes,
someone.
but there
that
was only about 4 students that it would have served. So by creating, and the preschools, just to be clear, I mean, that is not a free opportunity for the district. So we had to maximize the amount of students that we could serve.
So the
So-
closest that could serve my son, who had an IEP, was
Mm-hmm.
Hancock from Temple.
Well, so that's not necessarily how
That
that
was
works.
our option.
So when a student has an IEP, that's their placement is decided, as far as what pre-K they'll go to, is decided by the team. The parents are on that team. That's not necessarily how just regular pre-K works.
So the kids that are going to Hancock pre-K, how many are from Hancock?
I don't actually know those numbers off the top of my head, but I'm certainly happy to provide that online.
So those children coming out of pre-K would then go back to their home school, their hometown school, and increase the number, potentially.
I'm not sure I understand your
if-
question.
if someone
I
was going
I
to
think I do.
Hancock-
So you might have, like your son will be going to, or ended up going to Temple from Hancock.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that does happen. But I'm not sure.
That's why I was
that-
saying, how many of the kids in Hancock pre-K
Right,
actually
so,
would go to
right, so
Hancock?
I can absolutely break those numbers down and we can go through those and I can post those online if that's what people want to see. But I mean, Temple has 38 children this year.
Yeah, they do.
So I don't, across our district, I don't know off the top of my head, but how many students are attending pre-K? But remember, pre-K is not required. Students don't have to go to pre-K. That's an opportunity. So just to
Right.
be clear, not every child goes to pre-K and not everyone goes to our pre-Ks. So I don't know what that means for Temple next year.
So here's another question. Is it the responsibility of the district to be sending the students to the school of choice, not just the ones recommended? That they've recommended two different schools for two of my sons to go to. Because once you close Temple. So
Well, I'm not
isn't it-
closing. I just
No, no,
want to
no,
be clear.
I
I'm not closing
understand.
Temple.
I understand.
The
The
district would have to
recommendation-
vote on that. The
Yes.
recommendation from Prismatic goes to the board. The
Mm-hmm.
board will then decide whether to adopt that recommendation. And I can't speak to the board, so I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
feeling a little like, is this okay if I can continue to go? That goes to the board. The board will discuss that. They may say, we're going to close 3 elementaries. So what they do is then the next step, and that's what ultimately they'll decide what goes on the ballot.
So if we want to talk about equity for the children, I understand the later start time for the teenagers because they can't get up or whatever. They learn better if they have a later start time. But what about the kindergartners and the first graders that are getting up at 6 to get on the bus at 7 to be transported? They're going to spend at least an extra hour a day on the bus.
Well,
Now,
not true.
how is it not true?
So in determining, I said we made it based on geodemographics. We ran through the possible combinations. How much extra time does it add on the bus? And I think you can see that in chapter 5, some of the methodology that we used for that. It doesn't add an extra hour by closing these schools.
The bus route right now in Temple is an hour.
And the bus route as it is wouldn't necessarily be the bus route that would be there when we get to the new school arrangement. That's what I said about we added in the
I-
cost for 3 buses.
Right, I
It
understand
costs about
that.
66 and a half a piece in order to make sure that we can still manage to keep your bus rides at about the same length that they are now.
Okay, and one more thing, I'm sorry. As far as
Ma'am,
closing the school, how long does it take to mothball the school?
We have data on that. I can provide an answer to that
And
one,
is it
Superintendent.
out of the 4 schools that the towns that are going to potentially be losing, how many of the schools are there emergency shelters? Just out of curiosity.
None.
None?
I'm looking at my facility director and he's shaking his head and saying none. So SMS is the emergency shelter for Peterborough.
Yep,
I don't know what Temple
I don't either, that's why I'm,
Pierce.
Do you know what it
according, do you want to come down here and answer rather than just
No, but-
communicating with your head with me?
do you know what it is? Yeah, the elementary school. Okay, that's what that was my
So,
thought.
So just to be clear, so I've got Mr. Grassi here. He's the facility. He holds all of the documents.
Okay.
So I would say that if you are a town person and you've got a town member saying that it's the emergency shelter, apparently there is no formal plan with the school district that happened.
Okay,
We're open
Yep.
to it happening,
curiosity.
but there's no formal
Right.
memorandum of understanding. And and Mr. Grassi would know that off the top of his head.
Okay.
So,
All right, so in order to keep things moving along, I'm just going to give you an answer to your other question. Page 5-9 includes industry accepted standards for the cost to mothball a school. For all 4 facilities, annual mothballing cost is $134,365. However, we recommended that you not mothball a facility because why continue to pay for something if you're not going to use it? And recommended that the towns find alternative uses for those.
So,
So I think we,
well,
all right, so now we do,
Thank
we're on online? Okay, which one? Geez, that one's really. Okay, so just to ensure that if questions are not being answered in the online forum, it's because we believe we've covered them either in the presentation or in responses to other questions. So then which one would you like me to
Tanya?
take?
Tasha,
Ma'am?
I'm sorry. I just want to follow up on the emergency shelter piece because none of those schools have a generator. So they wouldn't be able to be. And so I was sorry we were up there whispering, but that's what we were talking about. They would qualify to be an emergency shelter.
Which one? Martha. Martha. Is that right towards the top? Oh, geez. Okay. I read this is a quote from an online forum comment, Martha. I've read most of the materials and I appreciate the work that went into the analysis process. I found the information included very helpful. I had a few questions. If a warrant article regarding consolidation of schools passes, how would the closed schools be used? We're leaving that up to the towns. I think that each town, and talking with board members, town selectmen, and members of the community, had some good ideas for various uses of them. Next piece to her question is, what would be the cost of keeping the schools that are not being used from deteriorating? Just answered that. No, it is not taken into consideration when calculating the savings because that's why we have a year of planning that gives the district and the towns time to find alternative uses and avoid having to pay mothballing costs. In light of what seems apparent that teachers' salaries directly correlate to student performance, how can an increase in teachers' salaries be built into the plan? While I would not say it's apparent that teacher salaries directly correlate to student performance, I do think that if you want to keep good teachers are smart and know where money is and go where more money is if they are interested in making more money. And who doesn't want to make more money? So that would be something that the board would need to consider. We definitely recommend a consideration for that. One more piece for her. The monies that are earmarked for capital improvements over the next few years, what will happen with those funds if there is a consolidation and several schools close? I think that these are capital improvement monies, so they could be reallocated either to move some items that are in years 4 and 5 and move them into years 2 and 3, or find some other use for them. They're capital funds, so they would be used for capital improvement things. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Angela Pape. I live in Peterborough, and I'm a parent of 3 kids in the district. This is a very nuanced issue, and I really encourage us not to be black and white in our thinking and have space for creativity in altering the proposal that was brought forth by Prismatic. First, I want to say that I agree with Planning Board member Gary Gorski's analysis that the projected student numbers for Peterborough are very low. Many of you may not know that in 2021, Peterborough started an affordable housing committee that has been very effective in engaging housing developers. There are several large housing developments in the pipeline that will add hundreds of units to Peterborough in the next few years. This will lead to a significant increase in Peterborough-based children coming to PES. So that's different. To me, it's different. You can't just take and I think most towns don't have an affordable housing committee. I actually think it's amazing. It's one of the reasons I'm sort of proud of what Peterborough has done. And I think we need to take that into account. The planning board has supported several of these developments. They're in the works. And then also, so as a parent with a preschool at PES, I worry a little bit about PES being overcrowded if you then have these more students, coming from Peterborough, and then you add, students from other towns. And I also was a little struck by the calculation that all the classrooms in PES would house 20 children. So my preschooler is in a class of 12 kids. They're not going to go up to 20 kids. So it just felt a little simplistic to just say, we're going to have all the classes have 20 students in it. So these 2 points give me pause on the recommendations. However, I value that this report is seeking to address real shortcomings. Choosing the status quo is choosing against possible improvements laid out in the report. First, I am excited about the potential to expand courses for world languages and STEM. As a parent, I really want my kids to have a very enriching and fulfilling academic experience in our district. Second, I'm interested in our district increasing teacher pay so that we're on par with other districts in the area. We will struggle with recruiting and retaining amazing teachers if we pay significantly less. Finally, the time from receiving the report a week ago for the public to read it to the school board taking an up or down vote in a couple of days feels extremely rushed and doesn't allow space for our best community thinking to be brought into the process. I'd prefer we take the prismatic report, slow down, massage it, make any alterations that we may need, such as, potentially not realizing, my gosh, all these housing developments are in the pipeline in Peterborough, and take these into account. So I think it will benefit us to slow down a little bit and really be thoughtful about what really is the best recommendation. So you all, you're great, but you're an outside group. And so I think we need to sort of take that and then with our local knowledge and context, make some shifts to it, and then take the time to really educate and build support for a proposal rather than having it be so rushed. So my question is about the process around, can this recommendation be altered by the school board? I think you said it could, but does it have to be decided in 2 days? Or is the warrant article going to be decided in a couple of months after you've taken the time to get community input from all the towns?
Okay, so I can address some of the pieces with the capacity. So one of the things, and thank you for bringing up the question, because I wrote it down and meant to say it with the previous person, but forgot. Unstated in what I said originally is we've left untouched the excess capacity at your middle schools and your high schools. And so let's start with the high school. We calculated a maximum capacity of 900 students at your high school. The Conval RFP said it was 1,000. As of October of this year, you have 653 high school students. So there's excess capacity there. One of the options that we looked at was we could move all these 7th and 8th graders into the high school. We could do that, there's space, but that's not what we recommended. Looking at the middle schools, we calculated about 1,000, a little more than 1,000, a little less than 1,000 spaces available across the 2 middle schools. As of October, you have 563 students across those 2 middle schools. So, not denying that there is a lot of optimism for Peterborough. Recognize that that's Peterborough, that both of these comments have been about, not the district as a whole. So yes, let's say things go gangbusters in Peterborough. The NESDEC recommendations are wrong. The New Hampshire Department projections are incorrect. There is space in your current high school and your middle schools to accommodate a doubling almost in both of those sets of grade levels. So as to the other piece, which was about the timing of it, do you want me to address what I know, or would you like to address that, or Superintendent or Dick? How do we want to do that one?
So I'm sorry, the question as far as.
Slowing it down and taking a couple of months.
And when do you create the warrant article? Like, do you create
Yes,
that this Thursday at the school board meeting, or do you create it after you've had more time for community engagement?
So the Articles of Agreement actually set out a timeline that if we're going to make a change to the warrant articles, there has to be a hearing that has to be posted 14 days before. Then so that would have to happen, and then we have a certain date that we have to post the warrant by. So there are several other steps along besides just Wednesday.
Okay.
As far as when the warrant has to be finished by, when it has to be posted by, and I can look all those up, but
Yeah, and my memory is from the timeline I'd seen other times, it was by the end of December. So if it was that case, it just feels really quick to
No,
me
I
as a
think-
community member.
I think what you're really thinking about is that we really, the administration really pushes the board,
and that's the truth, to make a decision about the budget by the end of December. And the reason we do that is because there's still a whole slew of things that we have to do once the budget is decided. And I am getting every indication that Mr. Dunning wants to speak, and I'm going to let him.
Making decisions to be done in a timely fashion. We have planned a board meeting for Wednesday. I certainly have heard from you that that opens up a concern about giving the board and the community enough time to look into the suggestions that have come forward tonight. The limitation we have is based off what Kimberly just shared. And so what we can do is we can back up to that date and move and say, when do we have to have a final decision so that if we're going to put something on the warrant, we can do that? I have no objections to doing that. The board can do two things on Wednesday. One, we can accept the report, or we can accept the report and the recommendation. One of the things is to accept the report so these people can get paid for the efforts they put forward. So my sense is, and I'm speaking as board chair, that we need to go forward to make sure we can say to you, we'll accept the report, but we will delay making a decision as a board on what we're going to do. Now, we have a number of board members here tonight. If there is an objection to only doing the meeting on Wednesday to accept the report, so we can pay the company, and they will wait before we accept the recommendation. So am I clear on the two choices there?
Yeah.
So as I look at my board members, if you have objections to us just saying we will accept the report, but we're not necessarily accepting the recommendation, we'll do that on Wednesday.
And you can massage the recommendation, like you can.
Yeah, we can
decide-
do anything we
Okay,
want, but
that's great.
I want to make sure, one, that
Yeah, sure. that makes
we
sense.
pay them for their efforts. So if I don't see objections from board members, then what we'll do on Wednesday at our board meeting, which is scheduled, is to say that we will accept the report. And we'll make it clear that that doesn't mean we're accepting the recommendation, but we'll accept the report. So unless I see something for board members to say we shouldn't do that, then that's where we'll go. And then we'll give ourselves some more time. But understand, we do have a time limit, and when we get to that time limit, we will have to make a decision. So we'll clarify that time limit so on Wednesday, we can say, here's a drop dead date, we've got to make a decision. Sure, okay.
Okay, so we're into online. Sorry. Serena. Wow. All right. I'm reading from a comment from the online forum from Serena. I have seen the positives of a bigger school, and I think they are able to offer more opportunities in every way. When done right, they allow students to take advantage of not only needed special ed services, they allow for quicker needs identification, more social opportunities, and more extracurricular and in-school activities. How do you see PES and some of the larger schools becoming better if we were to consolidate? That's the first question. So I think I've covered some of that. I think that there, with some larger student groupings, we have some more opportunities. We have an opportunity if we can reduce some of our teacher headcount through natural attrition, no layoffs. We can potentially, retain the best teachers around, if not in the entire state. Those are just a few of the examples. There are a few others in the report. Continuing from her, I was also able to have one of my children attend a small school. I loved a lot of things about the school. However, I soon realized that they were not able to provide the identification of weaknesses or the needed services and help he needed. School choice to a different school is available for the students who have needs that cannot be met at the smaller schools, and it's also an option for students wanting a bigger school experience. Do we have numbers on the amount of kids that school choice out of or into each school? And does that include the 5th grade DCS students who choose not to stay at DCS for 5th? Do you have those numbers, Superintendent? Sure. And then, so while you're looking those up. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Can I just make another comment too, to piggyback on that stuff? So I think the initial comment about Peterborough having a lot of growth, what he didn't consider was the demographic of the town of Peterborough. We have quite a few senior living communities and they add a lot of people. And as far as I'm aware, not an expert, but I believe a lot of the current building projects that are on the books are 1 and 2 bedroom units and affordable housing, which does not necessarily mean that they are going to be school-age children that need classes. It could be retirees or working professionals that want an office and a bedroom.
Thank you. And then there was one other question you had in there that I can answer while the superintendent's looking for those numbers. If there is no inequality in education, there should be no reason for kids to move schools, correct? And so, that's actually a very nuanced question, right? We did find some inequities across there. We went into looking at the schools going, first of all, if one of these buildings is falling down, this job is really easy, right? Props to the facilities department. The buildings are all very nice. They're equitable. Are there needs? Yes. But equity? Yes. But there are reasons to look at why we should do this. My least favorite one is cost. Choosing to continue to maintain as many elementary schools as you have has a cost associated with that. And if you go into it with eyes open and say, you know what, I prefer to have that instead of being able to add resources to secondary schools, because we don't want to continue to grow a huge budget, that's a choice for the district to make and the community to make. But I would argue the other piece of it, extremely small class sizes, truly is not what educators say is best for students. A class of 5 or 6 kids is not the best learning environment for kids. I understand that from many people's experience, that feels good, right? Less kids in the classroom, the teacher will pay, instead of 5 kids, they'll give 20% of their attention to my kid. But students learn from their peers. Students learn from talking with their peers. Students learn from listening to the questions of other peers. Students learn social and emotional learning with peers. And most teachers that I talk to, and this is non-scientific, and so I've already given you the research, but it's one of my questions I've been asking people for years. What's the right size for a classroom? Teachers will not tell you 5 kids or 6 kids, 12, 15, 20. One of my 5th grade teachers that I work with quite a bit said 27, and she gave me all these reasons, 3 groups of 9, all kind, 2 kids are absent. I can still do 4 groups of 6. There's all kinds of reasons for it. And so I think that that's a consideration that should be included. Ma'am, did you want to do the kids that school choice out or into?
Yes, so please be aware that these are choices that parents make. This does not include students that are placed by an IEP team. Antrim to Greenfield, 1 student. Bennington to Antrim, 5 students. Antrim to Bennington, 1 student. Francistown to Antrim, 1 student. Francistown to Peterborough, 1 student. Peterborough to Dublin, 1 student. Dublin to Peterborough, 3 students. Bennington to Peterborough, 1 student. Bennington to Greenfield, 1 student. That is for the 23-24 school year. Well, it's really funny sometimes. People do not actually tell us that they're going to take their student to another school, and do that in a way that we would prefer that doesn't happen. So sometimes you know more than I do, because sometimes someone from Francistown used to live in Peterborough and they just continue to go to Peterborough. Most 8 of the ones I listed, 8 chose to go from a smaller school to a larger school.
Antrim to Greenfield, that's 1. Antrim to Bennington, that's 2. Peterborough to Dublin, that's 3. So, 3.
Okay. This way, right? Okay. Yes, sir.
I also want to express appreciation for the amount of, for the size of this undertaking. And I wanted to make 2 comments and then ask a question. First of all, I'm an educator for 33 years at both secondary and university level. And as a qualitative researcher, the comments have to do with process, really. I used to teach a course in survey design, and my perception, this is not an accusation, but my perception was that the online survey would have not passed my research design class due to its orientation. I also attended our local meeting. I live in Francistown, by the way, and a meeting was the wrong term for that particular gathering, again, in my opinion. My question is this. Wendell Berry, the philosopher, poet, novelist, says that when a town loses its school, it loses a piece of itself. And that's why I think it's more than just resistance to change that says change is hard. In particular, having institutions disappear from our lives presents us all with challenge. In Francistown, our community church closed a few years ago. And so that's one institution, local institution gone. Elementary school being closed, another institution gone. Schools exist in a set of contexts, a set of interlocking contexts, a socio-familial context, a socioeconomic context, an ecological context. I'm a geographer, so all these things sort of come naturally to me, right? And the other point before I ask my question, right, is that taking students who have done, and even teachers who have done really well in a certain setting and changing that setting may not necessarily lead to the same results. And I think that's one of the things that many folks are concerned about. I do have some agreement with Mr. Gorski's questions about population projections. I'm on the Southern New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission, and we were even told that these population projections that we were given about local growth were snapshots if everything remains the same. And we have no idea whether things will remain the same. Sorry, I should have said that earlier. But my question is, Antrim and Peterborough, because of their size, sort of like you could call them anchor schools or anchor communities. What was their rationale for choosing the 4 that were to close? Pierce, DCS, FES, and TES.
So I have one comment and then a response. I've been doing K-12 research for almost 30 years now. We've done hundreds of surveys. I'm currently co-editing a survey research handbook with 15 other PhDs and EDDs in the survey research field. I am currently an officer in the Special Interest Group for Survey Research and Education for the American Educational Research Association. And I'm also running for president of that SIG this year because they are forcing me to. So that's the comment. In response to your question about how they were chosen, geodemographics. The Antrim and Peterborough are your largest elementary schools. If we are consolidating schools, and they're also your 2 population centers, we agree on that. There's no reason to close those. If projections, I agree with you, projections are not fact. However, demographers tend to make a living by being right. And if NESDEC is correct, you can see where we're going student enrollment wise. I have no idea what we're building or who's going to move into that. And quite frankly, neither do you. We can build it. We don't know who's going to come necessarily, right? So in terms of looking at the models. We looked at a ton of models. And when I say looked at, I don't mean that we made this list and then said, okay, what do we really want to do? We spent time as a team talking about each one of these options. We spent time as a team going, what will this mean for each one of these different areas if we do this? Okay, what we are presenting as our recommendation to the board is not the first thing that we considered. We started from a position of first, do no harm. It's not necessarily the consulting's world's motto, but we adhere to that. Is the status quo okay? Is it acceptable to continue the things that we see in this district at the cost that we see? And so we then came to a geodemographic conclusion for it. We looked at the different schools. We looked at what the possibilities were. A lot of it was driven by what might happen with transportation, truly. Your prototype schools, if you've read chapter 2, 4 of your elementary schools are exactly the same architecturally. Flip the model over. You guys did a good job of reusing architectural plans, save money that way. 4 of those schools are prototypes. And so it just became a matter of what are the other impacts? And geodemographics drove it. The transportation times are generally the best with this model. Okay, so which online question did you want, ma'am? Judith. Why was the consolidation of the middle schools and the return of the 5th and 6th grade students to the local schools never an option at the forums? Also, why, if the recommendation is to close 4 elementary schools, why is the closure of 1 middle school also not included? I can answer the first question easily. You go to Appendix C as one of the activities that we offered at the town meetings. One of them was keep all the elementary schools but move grades 5 and 6 back to help fill them up. So we did offer that as an option. Another option was combine as many schools as possible, including perhaps the middle schools. So we did offer that option for discussion. And in some places, the first one, moving grades 5 and 6 back, was the #1 option in some of the towns. So that was something we did look at. Also, why, if the recommendation is to close 4 elementary schools, why is the closure of 1 middle school also not included? 2 reasons. The first I've already given you. One of the things that we do when we're doing those town forums, meetings, whatever word you choose to describe it, it's charrette in the planning world, but we found that nobody knows what that word is, with the exception of 1 person out of the 472 people who came. 1 person did know that word. But the town's appetite for change is low. And that's something that's definitely important when we look at these things. I'm not going to recommend something that I don't think you can't accomplish, right? I want to recommend something that is in your best interest that I think you can actually accomplish. The other reason for why we chose not to address the middle school, that does not require voter approval. Okay, your board could vote to close a middle school tomorrow, and that does not require voter approval. That is a board decision. The only thing that needs to be requires voter approval as per the 1967 Articles of Agreement is whether or not you close an elementary school.
Hi, I live in Francistown. I have 3 students in the school system. And I have a question, but I want to start by looking at, I think, one of the fundamental things that drove this whole process, which was the 2019 warrant article. I'm not going to quote it exactly, but it was along the lines of, should the school board make an effort to close a school, they're first required to produce an analysis of financial, educational, and social impacts on students and the town, in this case, 4 towns. Now, when the question was put to Prismatic about what happens to the sense of community for students, for the town, when you close a school, the response was, that's not in our scope of work. So my question is simple. When are you going to complete the analysis? I want to know, what's the analysis of the financial, educational, and social impacts on the 4 towns?
So I can answer the first piece. If that's a direct quote from me, there's probably some pieces on the front end and the back end of it missing. But I can offer you this. almost every presentation I do, I say change is hard. People nod their heads and go, yeah, I know change is hard, but here it's really hard. Change is hard. I totally agree with you. I've seen districts wrestle with these kinds of questions for years. That's the sum total of what we do. We don't go around looking just at school reconfigurations, but we help districts wrestle with tough questions. And it always involves making some kind of change. And change absolutely is hard. And so we helped a district in 2019 looking at their school bell times. They'd already made some adjustments in their school bell times, and they were coming back to look at some others. And so we said, well, this is a perfect opportunity. Let's ask the people who were here before the first change how they felt about it, how their life had been immeasurably altered, and then assess their appetite for making further changes. And we got back the results on that first question, how awful was making this first change? And they were all like, I don't know what we were worried about. It was fine. Yeah, it might have been difficult that first year, but we got through it. It's okay. Some of them, even though we knew the people we were surveying and knew that they were affected by this change, some of them had forgotten it had happened. And so I'm not suggesting that you will forget that this has happened, but I am suggesting that it is possible to make a change and come out the other side and be better for it. Let me add one piece to that from one of your own your own fellow community members. So we did write down everything everybody added in comments in the town meetings. And one of the things that I thought that was important to bring forward is from a Sharon resident. That Sharon resident said, quote, "Other towns don't realize that they will be fine without a school. We are," end quote. And that was not me, that's a town resident.
Okay, so I may have misspoken. My question is, when will the board present the full analysis required by the 2019 warrant article? Financial, educational, and social impacts on the town. That is not an analysis. My question is, when will you do this? You're required to by the warrant article before you even generate a new warrant article to close schools. So when will you provide this analysis?
I think the RFP to us was looking at the social impacts on students and the schools. I think we've done that.
Well, the warrant article says the town. So I don't think this is a question for you. I don't mean to be rude. I think this is a question for the board because they haven't completed the analysis. So the question is, when will they? That's right. 4 towns. Absolutely, actually, 9 towns.
The board was given a task. We did not have to respond to the warrant article. Understand, petition articles, you cannot hold a board to the warrant article. We have to make a decision whether we will do it or not. We decided that we would like to have an independent study to look at decisions we need to make for students in this district and the taxpayers. We put a request out for information. We had a company that hired that to give us that information, and we have gotten that information. To answer your question, I think what we're looking at is the information that was provided for us to make a decision on a board what will be best for the students in the Conval School District. So I can't answer your question because this is the information that we requested and this is what we got. As a board, we will make a decision on what we think is best. We are elected officials. You asked us to do this task, and we'll do it to the best of our ability. There'll be people who agree with us and people who disagree with us. But again, in a democracy, you elect people to represent you. They take the information that they've gained over the years to make the best decision from the information they have. And that's the only way I can answer your question. We will do our best with the information we have as your representative to address the needs of our students in this district and the taxpayers. That's how I can answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so which one? Elizabeth? Okay, quoting from an online forum question. I'm a Peterborough resident with one child at PES and another child who will be in kindergarten there next year. I read the full prismatic report up to the appendix section, and much of the appendix. Questions for the forum in no particular order. 1. Can you further explain the selection of so-called peer school districts? Did Prismatic do any research into the districts beyond looking at size and census designation related to location? Was the goal to find districts which are substantially similar to Conval? That's a great question and a unique one so far. Peer district selection is always a difficult process. And so what we've learned over the years is we do not go outside of state borders, because the minute we go outside of state borders, even when we're working with really large school districts on the order of 120,000 students, and they're the only district that size in the state, we run into all kinds of problems making things match up. Different states have different requirements for certain things. Some states require there to be a full-time nurse in every school. Other states don't require that, so that messes up your financial calculations. So we always stay within state borders. Within New Hampshire, there are not a lot of school districts that are the same size as y'all. So we picked some that were smaller and some that were larger. We did look at the rate of poverty in each one of them and made sure that we had some above and below. And then we also made sure, using U.S. Census designations, that you're all rural school districts, right? Y'all have different issues from super urban areas. And so that was the selection that we made. We did run it by the district just to make sure that there wasn't anything that stood out as a red flag, made two adjustments as a result of that process. And we used those for some comparisons. It's not the be all and end all. Please don't think that peer districts, we looked at you, and if you're not within the average or within the range of the peer districts on a certain criteria, that is cause for a recommendation. It's another data point. And in this one, we think it's very helpful in terms of looking at cost per student. If you look at cost per students in those districts, they are different from what you have here. And then you look at how many schools each one of those districts has. And you start to go, wait a second, maybe there's a connection here. We also looked at some other things like property tax rates, but that was actually post-analysis. That was looking at what the impact might be on a $2.5 million or so change in your annual budget. And that was actually post-analysis. I know that I'm not going to read all the other pieces in there that she has for that. She's got 3 other questions. Number 2, when looking at the projected population increase for Peterborough over the next 10 years, this is about the housing units question. I think we've effectively covered that one so far. Number 3, asks about the capacities. I think I've covered. New Hampshire Department of Education allows a couple different ways to determine what the capacity of a school is in terms of number of students. We used the lower of each one and then looked at some other pieces, including what the district had listed for their own capacities. Question about, even if a building such as PES can theoretically offer enough classrooms, can certain services absorb that many? I'm thrilled for this question, because people do not realize the work that goes into making changes like this. That's why we had a food service expert on this team. It's why we had a transportation expert on the team. Yes, you have enough space. We definitely looked at whether or not the kitchen facilities would be adequate. We looked at it across a couple different ranges for that. We looked at the same thing for transportation. And so we do believe that whichever way it shakes out, whichever way the students go, assuming some reasonable split there, that Peterborough Elementary could handle that. She asked about pickup and drop-off procedures and event parking at Peterborough Elementary. Interesting question, but that school is designed to hold more kids than you currently have. And so is it crowded? Yes. Do we wish more parents put their kids on the bus? Yes. But it could be accommodated. And then the last one she asked was regarding the perception in Peterborough that we, quote, subsidize, end quote, the smaller schools. Is there any current consideration of adjusting the apportionment formula to rely less on talent evaluation? What is required to make a change? That was not part of our project scope. We were not asked about reapportionment. I do not know if board wants to look at that or answer that. I know that our superintendent.
So reapportionment would also be part of a change to the Articles of Agreement. Right now, you are 50% average daily membership. That's not attendance. That's how many students on average you have for any given year, and 50% valuation. So certainly that can be something that got looked at when We did, yeah. We looked at it 3 years ago. We certainly can, in the, again, 15 years that I have been here, we looked at Paul Mountain's apportionment. We have looked at a variety of different formulas. The 50 ADM and the 50 valuation has consistently been over the 15 years that I have been here, the fairest across all of the towns. Any given year, depending on valuation, so some towns are at, 87% valuation, and if, you're in the last year before your evaluation, sometimes you're as low as 62. So that, ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows. But as of right now, that has consistently been the most fair way to do it. I would have to look. Yep. There was a,
I think we're up to you. I think so. Unless somebody tells me otherwise. I should know we're at 9:22 if anyone has a babysitter on a time clock.
Hi, I'm Laura Maffera of Francistown, and I first want to say that if we do end up closing our school in our town, I don't think that's something I'm soon to forget. I don't think that will just float out of my head. One thing I've heard quite often when in this discussion is the inequities in the schools, which I understand, but it seems like the formula that you have put in place reintroduces inequities. When you talk about having before and after care at only 2 of the now 4 schools, that creates an inequity. Again, with the smaller towns not having before and after care, but the 2 larger towns having that. There's also, if you dig deep in there, you talk about possibly adding foreign language to the elementary schools in year 3. Again, at AES and PES, once again causing inequities at the smaller schools. So why go through this process to address inequities only to create additional inequities?
Okay.
My second question is, we've all been able to see a lot of statistics about our students' scores and how the different schools are performing at this point. What's going to be done at these lower performing schools to bring their scores up to prepare them for our children coming from higher performing schools?
Okay. So in answer to your first question, I want to be careful. We didn't see a huge number in inequities in the easy to measure things, right? Facilities, all right. Transportation, the route times were similar and across a lot of areas. Food service was not equitable and not something I would recommend at some of the smaller schools. Technology, equitable. That's why I'm not talking about it, right? The district is under no obligation to offer before and after school programming. And so that is not part of the education equation. It did come up again and again in teacher focus groups. It came up at most of the town meetings as something that this town, this community needs. And it came up as something that, looking at where we're going with the demographics that we're looking at in terms of student enrollment, that maybe this helps us keep kids in this district. And so we did put in the report to start it at Antrim and Peterborough. If it could be made cost effective, you could roll it out to the other small schools. I say it that way because once you get to small schools, it becomes very difficult to make it cost effective when you're trying to divide 2 supervisors or 2 after school supervisor people across a very small number of kids. And so that's why we made that recommendation that way. As for the foreign language, it is again the same kind of a thing. In terms of number of students, we need to be able to, this is not my money. It's not the board's money. It is the towns and communities' money, and they have a responsibility to spend it as wisely as they think they can. And so at certain levels of student enrollment, more things become possible. And I'm sorry, I've totally blanked on what your second question was.
Performance.
Oh, performance. It's an interesting question. I think that one of the things that is important to look at from the teacher perspective And one of the things that we look at a lot in whether or not we're doing everything we can to ensure the success of every student. And that is we've got couple different terms I'm going to throw out there. Horizontal alignment, vertical alignment, and teacher professional development. Okay, horizontal alignment means that in the every third grade classroom, we're teaching all the things that need to be taught. So we're doing the curriculum, and we are looking at it to make sure that we're doing that. Vertical alignment means that I'm teaching what needs to be taught in second grade so that they're ready for third grade as well as fifth grade. Those kinds of, that's alignment both directions. And then teacher professional development. Your teachers in focus groups indicated that they were not totally thrilled with what they had in terms of abilities to ensure that those things were happening, right? If you're a teacher at one of the smaller schools, you're the only one for that grade. If you're stuck on how to teach a particular concept, who do you go to? You know, do you wait 2, 3, 4 weeks until you get a chance to talk to some of the other third grade teachers in the district? This is one of the benefits to having multiple teachers of the same grade in the same environment. And I know we can all Zoom, but those are not necessarily as effective. And it's not as in the moment as sometimes you need when you're teaching. And so we think that once we can work on, as a teaching community, improved horizontal alignment, vertical alignment, and being rigorous and conscientious about the professional development, we can work on ensuring teacher quality, which will help raise the performance of the students. Student performance is not the student's issue, right? It is the responsibility of the teachers. And so we want to make sure that the teachers are of the best quality.
That leads me to one final question, and that's on teachers. We know that it's been very difficult to hire new teachers and to some extent retain teachers. And I can only imagine that having a constant discussion about whether we're going to close schools or not doesn't help attract new teachers. If we now close schools and we're introducing new inequities, and I hear you talking about how now the 2 smaller schools of the 4 left are going to be even too small, then it leads me to think, like, how long until we're talking about going to 2 schools? So this discussion continues. What does that do to invigorate people to teach in our district?
So I would suggest to you that if I'm a new teacher coming out of school and decide I want to be a teacher, I look at teacher pay scales. And so if we want to attract the best teachers, we need to have competitive pay scales. There's some notes in the report on that. As for what would happen to the other 2 small schools, nothing about this would change the 1967 Articles of Agreement. If the warrant article, if I've got that term right, goes forward, we are recommending to the board, unlike what was attempted in some previous warrant and or petition articles, don't quote me on the right language there, which was more along the lines of give us, the board, the power to make the decision. We are recommending to the board, come to the community with a specific warrant article. We would like to close these 4 schools. It would include doing these other things. That doesn't change the 1967 Article of Agreement. And if 10 years from now, you wanted to look at it again, you'd still need a 66% vote to close the other 2 schools.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying it doesn't, I guess what I'm hearing doesn't make me seem to think that this will be the end of it. Like, we may continue to be in this trend of always looking at, well, what if, and putting our towns in the same position. And I'm just wondering how that affects our ability to hire people.
I can offer to you that demographers do not typically provide 20, 30-year projections on anything, and that's for good reason. Things can change, absolutely. I mean, I'd say that most of the data points we have that point to enrollment do not indicate that we're trending down to 0 anytime in the next future, but it also does not indicate that we are reapproaching the peak of enrollment, which was in 2002, 2003, when we had 3,170 students. Ma'am.
I'd just like to say one thing. You will be given an opportunity on the ballot in March. There will be an opportunity to vote to improve recruitment and retention teachers. I guarantee it. We can't give you the details now, but you will have an opportunity. We recognize the need. You will have the opportunity, guaranteed. Vote for it, please.
Do you want me to cover Karen's question now? Okay. The question is, has Prismatic had a similar situation in another district? Please cite that district where the recommendation was followed and follow-up reporting denoted success. And that's the first of two questions. It's a pretty broad question. Prismatic makes a lot of recommendations. Recommendation of similar magnitude of this one, yes, 2021. We made a wholesale recommendation regarding changing all school start times in a district called Anne Arundel County Public Schools in Maryland. They have about 85,000 students, 13 different attendance zones, 13 different high schools, a whole lot of things. There is, consolidating or reconfiguring schools is something that changes a lot about a school district. And I don't mean to make it seem smaller than it is. It's a big deal. But changing the school start times in a school district, when you're changing all of the school start times for every single school, affects absolutely everyone in that district in a large way. They did accept our recommendation and they implemented it with almost no problem. And I say it that way because we're currently working with a couple of districts that did not approach it in the same way that we did with Anne Arundel, and they are having a lot of challenges. In terms of school consolidation or not school consolidation recommendations, we made a recommendation in 2020, I think, might be 2019, Mid-Dell Public Schools in Oklahoma. They're a district of about 10,000 students. We recommended that they close several of their elementary schools. They did do that and they closed them successfully. And I think if you go there now, people will tell you that was the right decision at the right time. Counterpoint example, 2014, we were asked by the Virginia Department of Planning and Budget to do a review of a school district called Amherst County Public Schools. They have, I think they had 6 elementaries, don't quote me on this one. At the time, they had 2 extremely small elementary schools, somewhere in the neighborhood of 65, 70 kids each. And they were asking us to take a look at what would be the best way to close them. We ultimately recommended that they not close those schools. And there were good reasons for that. They were remote rural areas that served remote rural kids in those areas. They were not built to hold 500 kids or 120 kids and had 75 kids in them. They were built to hold less than 100 kids apiece, so they were pretty close to capacity, actually. And that translated into their facility costs were what they should be. They had staffed them appropriately, and they accepted that recommendation. Can't tell you what's happened since then, but I know that in 2014, they chose not to close them. Oh, sorry, there's one more question in there. Page 514, please highlight the savings on property taxes. Is that annual savings? Does Prismatic feel that is a significant savings? I prefer to only use the term significant only when we're talking about stats. It is a substantial savings. I think I've explained the reasons for why we think there is a range of possibilities there that could potentially turn into property tax savings. Okay, that's it. You want me to? All right, closing. How do we do this? I'm sorry.
We're not gonna let the rest of
We have a number of folks who haven't had a chance to speak.
Do you want me to? Okay, so we were scheduled to go till 9 o'clock. We've gone to 9:34. I spoke for less than 45 minutes. I actually spoke for 32. Kept track. What do you
Pleasure.
want to do?
At a board meeting, we allow the public to speak to the board for 2 minutes. If we can set it to 2 minutes, we should be able to give you all an opportunity to pose your question to us and be able to leave here at a reasonable time. So we'll give
May
you
I,
2 minutes to pose your question.
at the school board meeting, you mean?
No, tonight.
Right now.
Oh,
Can I submit a follow-on question? If I have questions more than 2 minutes, can I submit them to someone on the board?
Absolutely.
Follow-on question?
To Alan. Yep. Okay.
so I have 2 questions. I may not be able to get through them in 2 minutes depending on the answers, but I think we've been talking about inequity here, so I think everybody deserves a chance to be heard and have their questions answered. So it wasn't so long ago that the administration was lauding the innovation at FES for multi-age classrooms. And in fact, Kimberly was a big part of that. We had school districts from Canada who came down to visit to learn about what we were doing. The story that you mentioned earlier really struck me, talking about the two children that were helping each other learn to read, one with the advanced and one who was still ramping up. That strikes me as something that's important, which is instilling community values of helping others. And I think that's something that is important in a small community school. And I noticed when you were talking earlier with the survey results from the students in middle school who were reflecting back on their time in a smaller elementary school, you had framed it as there was a mix of opinions. All of the ones that you mentioned, however, were negative, and I wondered if you wanted to take a minute to mention some positive ones as well to create more balance.
Okay, so that was focus group comments from the middle school students, and those are included in chapter 3. The summary of the focus group comments are there. And then the reason I didn't give you any specific pieces for that was there weren't any specific, they said, it was exactly what I said. It's good and bad. And then they went on, and then I provided some quotes for it.
Okay, so if I go back and look at those, I won't find any specific positive comments. And you
I don't know.
are
I'll
not
have to go back
interested
and
in
read
mentioning
chapter
anything?
3. But in the interest of time, I suggest you go to chapter 3 and look at the student input section that begins on 3.2.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I guess my second question is, again, related to some comments earlier. I noticed in the presentation tonight, there was a fair bit of detail around financial benefits of the plan that you're proposing. What I did not see was much in the way of educational based outcome improvements. I also noticed in your, and I'll read it here as a direct quote, in the Prismatic report, only 28% of surveyed parents in the district trust the school board to make the best decision for students. So my question is, why should we trust Prismatic and the school board in this process?
Prismatic has no vested interest in the outcome of this project. We've been working in this field since 2007. We've made our best effort and sourced it as strongly as we can. The financial implications were requested by the school board, so we provided them. As to the social, emotional, and academic gains, we would not have made a recommendation like we made if we did not think and believe that you were going to get academic gains from this. Can I quantify that and tell you if you close these 4 schools, you're going to go up 5.2% in reading and 6.7% in math? No, that's not how it works. But what we can do is regroup. We can provide the vertical and horizontal alignment emphases, the professional development emphases. We can provide the opportunities for more group work and station work in the slightly larger class sizes that could, yes, lead to improved academic outcomes. But I can't quantify that. Do you want me to cover?
Would the school board like to answer the other half of that question?
No, I'm
Okay.
2 minutes for your question.
Okay.
No, I was just confirming that no one would like to comment further. Okay.
Do you want me to do an online one or just go to the? Do district schools pay property taxes? This is one for the board. I'm pretty sure I know the answer.
No, district school properties do not pay property taxes. They are exempt from property taxes because they are nonprofits owned by the community.
All right, easy one.
My name's Ellie Larrabee Byers. I have 5 children in the Conval district. I have 1 at GES. He is in preschool. I have 4 children in Francistown Elementary. I have the somewhat unique experience of having 3 children being the same age. We moved here in October of 2020. At our last school district, my children were in 3 different classes. Their class size was 28 students. I can tell you that my children did not receive the same attention and care that they do at Francistown Elementary. One of them was almost slipped through the cracks on not being tested for her IEP. Here, the experts at the people at Francistown took care of her, and now she is far ahead than she was when she started. So some of my co-parents already asked some other questions, but I will address transportation. How do you expect there to be such a small impact in the cost in transportation? And if my child is on the bus for longer, which they will be, I mean, if you're going from Francistown even to Greenfield versus Francistown people to Francistown Elementary, the kids are going to be on the school bus longer. Can you tell me what the increased odds are of my child being involved in a motor vehicle accident when they're on the bus for 2 or 3 times longer?
Okay, in answer to your first comment, we know our recommended class sizes of 28. New Hampshire says K2, 20, max of 25. They want you to get to class sizes of 20. Grades 3, 4, maybe 5, max class size of 25. They want you to get
No,
down.
I heard
Okay,
your
so
descriptions
I
and
just
all
want to
of
be
that, but
clear, we're
I'm
not
telling you
recommending
that
going to class sizes of
I
28.
watched my children go from larger class size to a smaller class size, and I'm telling you that 3 different students in 3 different classes went to a smaller class, and their test scores and statistics went up.
Okay,
So that's the comment. That's my comment to
and that would be in line with some of the research. The question is, what is small and what is too small? And
Francistown is small. My kids are in a class of 12.
Okay.
She didn't answer my question about transportation.
So, okay, so we did do, so here, and I said this up front in the transportation piece. A lot would have to be decided once we decide, because we opted for the hard path, right? We opted to say, give parents a choice. And we ran some scenarios without giving parents some choice, and came up with a few pieces for the transportation. But it's total transparency, the transportation piece depends on students' parents' choices for their students. We did look at where you are currently with your elementary school bus runs and which ones already currently have ones that are about 60 minutes. There's one, and then what the other ones look like. And that, to be fair, remember, if a student's on the bus for 60 minutes, that doesn't mean every student's on the bus for 60 minutes. That means the first kid that's picked up is on the bus for 60 minutes. And so we did look at a rough estimate of what might happen if you don't change anything else and you run the same route, and instead of dropping off at one of the schools that is to be consolidated into something else, you just keep going to the next school. It's a very simplistic answer and not the way you would actually do transportation, but it gives us a way to look at the odds and what it looks like. And so travel times were calculated in there. That's on page 5-11. And then we looked at what the additional costs might be. That is the reason we included 3 additional bus routes in the recommendation. We're not telling the board, don't do that. We're explicitly saying, except that you're going to probably want to add 3 bus routes at least. That might be all you need once you get done with it. And then we provided some ideas for reducing transportation costs on page 512, including looking at the school start time piece.
And the safety issue of children being on the bus longer versus shorter?
There are no known statistics from the Transportation Safety Administration on a lengthier bus ride leading to higher possibility for an accident. In fact, what the National Association for Pupil Transportation would tell you is that they feel that their statistics indicate that riding on a bus is the safest form of transportation to get to school that there is. And so you can look at those statistics.
Thank you for not answering my question.
So you want me to cover the last one here? All right, I think this is the last online one. Due to the current funding formula, 50% population, 50% enrollment, Dublin is currently paying the most per student in the district. There has already been discussion among Dublin residents in the past about attempting to pull out of the Conval district because it would be a huge cost savings for us. Residents of Dublin will not be happy to be paying more than anyone else per student, while other towns pay much less and keep their school. Have you considered the possibility that this recommendation could lead to a negative financial impact from a wealthy town leaving the district?
So I think I may have addressed some of this when I talked about the appropriations and the ebb and flow of valuation. I do think that the board, and I can't again speak for the board, does take into consideration all of the risks involved. Am I answering this the way you'd like me to answer it? All of the risks involved with any kind of change to configuration. Yes, no. I think they're all okay, thanks.
I'm going to make a quick statement real quick before I actually do my part, and my part is 2 minutes. I tested it before I showed up here. I will be consulting with a lawyer to make sure that the legal document of the warrant article that caused you to do this, and I strongly suggest the school board does as well, because it does say in there that you must present this to the voters to approve this analysis, not the school board. And it says prior with an underline, this is on your website, prior to the school board making any recommendations, which potentially could mean legally that you must wait one more year after you allow us to approve your recommendation. So make sure you talk to legal advice before we move any further, other than approving Dr. Preto's analysis. So let me do my part and then you can go from there. My name is John Wood. I'm a resident of Dublin. One of the common themes throughout the consulting firm's process was to highlight the financial differences between each school in the district. This was delivered in graph and question form on many different occasions. The information appeared to be specifically comparing the inequality of cost between elementary schools. Whether the data was intentionally misrepresented or not, the cost per pupil graph that was submitted to the communities during certain phases of this project depict a bias towards the schools that host pre-K classes. This graph also provided at the data party that the school board, administrators, and principals attended, that I and 3 other parents attended as well. Of the 8 elementary schools, 4 have pre-K and 4 do not. And to make this shorter, Hancock Elementary School had a price per child of $34,000 the year before they started pre-K. This year, or the first year they had pre-K, they added additional 9 students to K through 4, and they also added 10 kids in the pre-K. Their number per child dropped to $24,661. So my question to you, ma'am, using a CPA, was this an oversight by Prismatic to misrepresent the information specific to the cost per pupil, including pre-K in the schools that do offer pre-K, showing a bias to the schools that do offer it?
No.
Okay. And
Yep. So, we did provide the data that are provided on the New Hampshire Department of Education website as the cost per student. They do include both pre-K students and pre-K costs. Anyone know how many teachers are in a pre-K classroom here? How many paraprofessionals are in a pre-K classroom? How many adults is that in a pre-K classroom? How much does that add? That adds cost. Does that add more cost than one teacher in a classroom? So to your point, I went back and reran the numbers, taking out the pre-K students and the pre-K costs for those students. And here's what it changes. You asked about Hancock, right?
But before you answer, from one year where they had pre-K to the year that, or they didn't to the year they did, they added $1,000 in overall expenditures because pre-K also costs money. So I would like, my question to you, in the interest of time, is for you to show the exact data that you did to calculate all of the per pupil costs, because some people in this community will vote based on their pocketbook, and there are people who believe, even administrators and your comments in the data party, I cannot believe that this costs more at these schools per kid than the other elementary schools. And pre-K has dramatically changed that conversation. And I will let you be.
All right, so we ran the numbers using 2021-22 data because the New Hampshire Department of Education has available, their most recent, at a per school level, is the 21-22 data. We then subtracted out both the pre-K students and a good estimation for the pre-K costs that are added. So what did that do to Hancock Elementary? It dropped it from the 24,661 figure that you quoted to 24,237. Can I explain how you went from an excess of 30,000 before pre-K to 24,661 after pre-K? The answer is it's not all pre-K. I don't know if the superintendent has another piece to that. Would you like to add to that, or you just want me to continue?
There was 9 additional net new students K through 4. I read the same report you did. The denominator of the equation dramatically changed the cost per child. I want to make sure that voters understand that this is not a like-for-like comparison between the towns. you are skewing the data to show favoritism to schools that have pre-K. Then show me the data. That's what I asked to the school board. That's what I asked of you. Show the data, because you did not provide that data in your report. You recommended this as a one-slide piece. But I can tell you right now, there are plenty of administrators and school board members that made that conversation at the data party. Next question, please.
Nope, okay, sorry. Okay, are there any more online questions, ma'am? Okay, so, go.
Hi, my name's Lisa. I'm a Dublin resident. I just want some clarity on the property tax piece. So for anyone who has a $300,000 property, roughly, has a tax savings, for example, for Dublin residents of $173 a year. Is that correct? It's per year? Or is that broken up? Or-
Yes.
Okay, so that's less than my grocery bill every week. So if you go on the higher end, you said, which could be around 4 million in savings. So that comes out to about $280 to $288 for a Dublin resident. Again, that's like my hair appointment and a grocery bill for me. So again, I don't know that that is going to be an important enough amount of money for me to say that I want my children's school closed. The other piece is on 10/4/2022, as I was reviewing former board minutes notes, there's a lot of discussion, and you guys have been very open about this, around remodeling. It sounds like you have brought on an architect, you're working with them, because I know that there are updates that our buildings need. How is that going to affect our taxes? Because typically remodeling projects increase our taxes. So is that money really going to come back to us as taxpayers, or is it just going to be reallocated for other things? Because the board has said over the years, when we moved here, that, you know, the hope was to get that money back into taxpayers' pockets. But if you're going to remodel buildings, which is ACS, GBS, Conval, and ATC, which I'm not even sure what that is, then I don't see that money coming back to us. In fact, I see our taxes going up. So does anybody want to comment on the remodeling project or what the plans are around that you guys have been
Is that
talking
your
about?
question, the
Yeah.
remodeling
Yeah,
project?
well, that and the taxes, yeah.
So I can't speak to what the impact might be for each person. We were asked to look at what the possible savings might be, and then we were further asked to provide what that might look like to a taxpayer, and we've done that. As to whether or not you feel that is a substantial savings or not is up to each individual. I leave that to you. The current budget, I'm sorry, Superintendent, the current budget is 54 million.
The current gross budget is just a little over 56 million. That
56 million.
that gross budget includes, so gross budget includes our grant dollars, our entitlement grants. So our actual general budget is about 54 million.
Okay, so 54 million for your general budget. Okay, so if we get to the $4 million savings, we're looking at 8% savings. That's up to you to decide whether or not that is substantial enough to make the change. What I would submit to you is everything has a choice. Everything has a cost to it. You choose to continue to do along this path. You either then accept that we will spend $54 million in general funds in this way, and we will forego the other opportunities that are out there. Or we will choose to add $4 million more so that we can continue to have new opportunities that we pointed out are wanted and needed in this district. As to the piece, what was the second part of the question?
It's really in reference to the fact that there's been a lot
Oh,
of
the
discussion
CIP.
around the remodeling, except there's no identification of what, in the notes that I can find anyway,
Okay.
of what the remodeling would be, and knowing how expensive remodeling projects on buildings, and I'm not saying they're not warranted, because I've been in some of the other buildings. But how is that going to affect our taxes when the whole selling point for this 5 years ago when we moved here was your taxes are gonna go down?
Okay, so I can't speak to what was said 5 years ago, and our charge on this project was not find ways to save money. We've done projects like that, and we've done projects where school boards have come to us and said, you need to find ways to carve X amount of money out of our budget for next year. That's not what this project was. This project was to bring to a logical conclusion a discussion this community has had for at least 10 years as to what's best for Conval students and taxpayers moving forward. And we've given a recommendation for that. As to the CIP, your capital projects, do you want to speak to that, sir?
presently, we're working with the architects to look at the renovations for the CTE, which is the ATC here at the high school, and other renovations at the high school, and future projects around the middle school. We have no numbers to give you yet because the architects have to go through that before we can come up with some numbers. When we have the firm numbers, we'll bring them to the public, but we're looking 2 years out before we get to that point. So we have no hard figures to bring to you. Even then, it would then be brought back to the voters. It would probably have to come under a request for funds. So at this point, can't answer it because I don't have hard figures for you.
Hi, it's Christopher Gallagher. I'm from Dublin. I wanted, for the school board, I've heard the stuff about the building in Peterborough. I wonder if you would make a commitment to talk to the planning board. These are specific. There's 296 apartments, particularly the Catholic Charities ones are geared towards working people, affordable working people. Can you talk to the planning board? Will they come to your meetings? They've got very specific projections about it. Is that something you guys can do?
That's something the board can look at.
Yeah, because that affects the student population in Peterborough anyway. Okay. I'm going to be brief. I'm going to talk about the social capital and about my experience at Dublin. We moved to Dublin about 40 years ago. My wife and I, a couple of years later, had 2 children who came into the Dublin school. Before that, we were members of the community, but really weren't a community. We didn't know very many people. Day one at the school, we met people who became our friends. My wife died a month ago, and at her reception at the church, there were probably 10 people that we had met in first grade in the pews. That's the kind of thing that a school brings to a community to bring it together. So let's not mess it up. Thank you.
Hi, so I have one little comment on the report. I don't think the numbers really add up. My name is Zach from Antrim. The numbers don't really add up. You've got a chart for saving $2.6 million a year for the school budget. That's about the budget of the 4 schools that are being closed. So the other schools need to absorb the 200 students. There's more transportation cost. You've got extra classes for foreign languages, before and after school program, not adding any extra cost from that 2.6 million savings. It just doesn't add up. Now my question, that's just my feedback on this. Now my question is, why isn't the school board focusing more on when all these students are getting lost? I know a family in Hancock that has 3 kids that they pulled out to do homeschool because they weren't happy with the school. They told me about 3 other kids in Hancock that they pulled out because that family wasn't happy. Last year in Antrim, my son's first grade class, between the 2 classrooms, there was a little over 20 kids. This year in second grade, there's 14 kids. So that's another 6 kids there. That's just people that I know that have left the district. The problem is enrollment. Why aren't we focusing more on enrollment with how to retain students and how to attract other students that normally wouldn't be going to Conval, like that were going to Wells School or any of these other things like the charter schools or anything like that. Like,
Does the board want to respond to that question? Because I think it was directed to y'all.
yeah.
I think you'll find that the board, working with administration, is trying very hard to look at how we do the best thing for kids. I've been in this district 41 years as a teacher and administrator, and now I'm on my 9th year on the board. People make choices for what they think is best for their kids. I can tell you from the board perspective that talking with the superintendent and administration, staff is doing the best they can to provide the best education we can for our kids. part of the problem is, and Tasha shared that, is one of the things that helps teachers be the most effective is being able to share their strategies. And when you have a school that has, let's just say, 3 third-grade teachers, they get the opportunity to talk about their instructions, to talk about what works, what doesn't work. When they do assessments, they can talk about what strategies work to help their kids be successful. So one of the advantages is having that opportunity for teachers to share that kind of information. So when we look at this proposal, I'm in agreement that when you can put teachers together to talk about their instructions, you change what happens to kids. And that would truly address what you're talking about. But people, in all my years, we had kids who went to private schools, and I'm happy for that. And we had kids who went from private schools that came back to the public school, and I'm happy for that. That's a parental choice. I don't know specifically why these people have left or come and gone. That's their choice. But it goes both ways, and I've seen all of that. But what I do believe in is giving teachers the opportunity to work together makes a difference in the instruction. So that's the best way I can answer your question, but we are very aware of the things you're talking about.
Okay, but you're not actively trying to retain students.
I think we're trying to actively retain students by addressing the things we're talking about here to make sure we can provide those opportunities. We also have a lot of staff that works at trying to help kids be successful. So, yes, and believe me, we have kids who have tuitioned into this district too. So it's not like we don't bring kids in. I don't know what the tuition numbers are, but we have some.
So I guess my response in just off the top of my head is how would you like us to do that? Because when we add things to the budget that aren't boots on the ground, we get asked to take it out and told that the administration is heavy. If I'm going to develop like the private schools do, like the EFA, the Children's Scholarship Fund is able to do, if I'm going to do those things, then I have to have money to do it. And right now, we run, honestly, we run our administration in the SAU on a shoestring. I know it must not seem that way, but we work all the time. And so I can tell you of the 127 children in our district that take advantage of the voucher system, 96 of those children have never stepped foot in our district. I can't retain students that never came in the first place.
You can attract them though.
Of the students in Peterborough, 14 students, 5 have never come to our district. Yes, I can attract them, but I can't do that without funds. And our funds right now go to the schools so that we can make sure we have boots on the ground in front of teachers. I know for a fact after 15 years, and just to be really clear, I'm just trying to give you information. For the last 15 years, one of the main things, one of the reasons that people leave our small schools is because they don't want their child in a multi-age classroom, a multi-grade classroom. Last year at Hancock, daily, I was inundated with emails, as was Mr. Harper on the board, because people did not want a multi-age classroom, multi-grade classroom. That is one of the reasons people leave. If we're not going to have multi-grade classrooms, there are grades that have 4 and 5 children in them across our district. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we actually need, and the board will tell you that 2 years ago, I had a huge development goal. I wanted to create a development office. I wanted to do things to attract people to our district. But at the end of the day, we don't have the money to do it.
Hi, I'm Erin Blanchett. I am from Francistown, New Hampshire, or the Francistown district. We moved actually 3 years ago from Peterborough to Francistown. for the small community, for the elementary school. Okay, so kind of piggybacking on the gentleman before, his question was, is there a plan of looking for why all these kids are going to the charter schools? Why are they all homeschooling? I mean, that seems to be an issue that I'm not sure is being addressed. I don't know.
I don't think that's accurate. I think we do look at non-kids.
Okay, I'm asking because I don't know. My kids are 2.5 and 5 months old.
The superintendent answered that. Sometimes because of all the classrooms. That's the answer I'll give you now.
Okay, is Francistown one of those? Because I know the 3rd and 4th grade was in that, and okay, and they were negative as well. I know that because I have nieces and nephews in the school system and they liked it. But for my next question, so with us moving forward, is there going to be something to sorry, where's my question? So with the constant talk of us closing the schools and the actual closing of schools, is the help going to hurt or our ability with attracting those teachers? Because I feel like, yes, we've talked about it, but what's the plan for moving forward with the admins, aside from trying to attract them? Where's the question? Go ahead.
Attracting teachers, we hope to do that, and Jim mentioned it early, by making sure we address the salaries. The other part is having a stable environment for them to be in every day. It's another piece. So, but it's really salaries that attracts teachers, and I believe that's what we're trying to address. It's also 10 o'clock, and we have 3 more people who want to speak. There are another option. You can send your questions to Alan, and we'll address them, or people who need to leave, if you want to do that. I want to be fair to you, but it's 10 o'clock at night.
Really quick. Really quick.
Very quick.
Very quick. Yeah, quick.
Very quick.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Deal.
Go ahead. 1 minute, Catherine.
Both of my kids had this gentleman for a principal. When he says something, you usually do it. I don't actually have a question, so that'll actually save some time. I have a recommendation that the board think about delaying this at least a year, and here's why. The children in this country have gone through hell from COVID and the teachers. And I think this school district did a really good job doing the best they could in the framework that they had to work in. And COVID was a tremendously traumatic thing on the children and the parents and the teachers. And I know how professional all this was, but my recommendation is to just give them a little time to recover.
Just for you people to know that the people who are streaming this have to pack up. So what you're saying will be heard here, but it may not go over the net, so you know. All right, go ahead, 1 minute.
Blake Minkler from Dublin. My question to the board is, are we running a surplus in the budget this year as of right now? And is that already in the plans of being returned to the towns? Are we running a surplus of $2.1 million?
At this time, no, we are not. That is not what our cash flow analysis is saying. We are about $500,000 up, which is not bad for this time of year.
So since October 26th with the select board reps, that figure has come down.
No, I'm sorry, that was, yeah, so the amount that was with the reps was last year's surplus.
Okay.
So that was so if I'm talking about on this year's budget, this year's fiscal year, so that was on the
22 to 23.
Right, that was on the 22 to 23. At the end of 23, we had a surplus.
This year, right now, we're running about $500,000 based on our present cash flow analysis. Now, that can change, and often does, goes up and down and up and down. I do need to let you know that the 2.1 million, most of that, and most of what we have right now, is because we can't fill all of our positions. So that savings is directly related to us not being able to fill teaching positions.
But that money could be appropriated to serve the inequities within the school district?
I really, really need to hire a science and math teacher at the high school first before I spread that money anywhere else.
Okay.
So, I mean, when I'm saying teaching positions, this is like case managers that we are legally obligated to have. This is a science teacher and 2 math teachers at the high school. These are not like positions that we just don't need. These are
But you can
not offering
reallocate,
things at the high school.
you are authorized to reallocate student position salaries in other areas.
Can you say that one more time?
Are you authorized to reallocate student position salaries in other areas?
The board can reallocate dollars and transfer monies, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Hi, I'll make this as quick as I can. I'm Jessica from Hancock. I've got 3 kids, district age, not in the district right now. I'd be happy to talk to the board about why they're not in the district right now, but no one's asked me. So to the point of the gentlemen and ladies who talked before about homeschoolers, charter schoolers, private schoolers, there is room for growing the district from local students. If this was a business, you would be looking at potential customers and how to attract and retain. And I'm not sure why we're not putting a little more effort there. I think if we can invest $87,000 on this, we can invest $87,000 on potentially attracting 180. Yeah, I forgot the number. I don't have all the numbers in my head anymore. But I feel like we could spend a little money on actually getting those students back into school. And I think there are reasons we could attract students. If we look at just the lunches, which we saw in the report, I didn't read all 400 pages, I read about 200 of them. And the school lunches don't really attract. So that's just a tiny, tiny thing we could look at, but there's so much more. Speaking of the lunches, I was looking at the numbers in the charts, and there was a lot of talk about past savings that the school board had voted for, which included outsourcing the lunch ladies so that we didn't have to pay their benefits anymore, which seems unethical, but understandable, okay. So there was an outside firm hired to do the lunches for the schools, with a possible savings, which is calculated at some $250,000, whatever it was. But since then, because it didn't work out the way it was calculated, it's actually cost more than that to go through this firm, because we have to pay them a certain amount every month, 10 months out of the year. But not as many students as we predicted are buying the lunches or the breakfasts, and so we're actually in the hole for that. And it shakes my confidence about the numbers that I'm seeing. And I wonder if the connection that I made by reading the report is connections you guys are making about efficiencies. Again, if we're running the school like a business, there are potential customers in your area.
So
I'm one of
let me clear up one thing. So we did not look at the specific reasons for why the district chose to outsource. We noted it as a fact that the district chose to outsource.
I read it in the report.
Typically-
I'm not hallucinating it. It was
So,
just in the report. Just read it.
If you let me finish the sentence.
Of course. Just wanted to correct. that it was
Typically,
there.
a district outsources food services for a couple of reasons. They have no one on staff with the expertise to run it. It's complicated. There's lots of federal rules. Another reason a district will outsource is because benefits rates, I quoted them to you, are run about 50% for every position in the district. Those in private industry can often get by with paying lower benefits rates or paying no benefits rates. That is one of the reasons school districts outsource. We did not assume any intent on that. You're absolutely correct. The district's in the hole about every year, about $200,000 because of a lot of the things that are factored into that food service program, which could potentially be part of the way the contract is written. Another piece of it is clearly providing services to schools where it ends up being a money loser for that company. And that's included in the cost savings that we calculated. And we calculated out about $46,000 in cost savings from the reconfiguration process, which would chip away at that $200,000 a year loss that you're currently incurring in your food service program. The other thing to include in that is at this district size, should you have an expectation that that program run at break even? Yes. Are there a lot of challenges inherent in this district that make it very difficult to do that? Yes. Part of that is the 8 elementary schools.
Chris Raymond from Dublin. I happen to be on the select board, but I speak personally here and thank you all on the school board for what you do. It's a thankless position. I just want to remind you that the voters put you here to look out for the voters' best interest. The voters also, 78% of the voters apparently asked you to fulfill the duties of that warrant article. So I hope that you see that through before you make a final decision. Yep.
Chris?
Yep.
We take an oath.
Yep.
To do just that.
I know you do.
So just understand, our mission is to look after the best interests of students and the taxpayers. I just want to share with you things that we hear from taxpayers. We can't afford it anymore. There are people who can't afford to put food on their table. There are people who can't afford to live in their homes. We hear that. I've heard that for as long as I've been here. We're at a point now where we're asked to try to do something to help students and taxpayers. And by the way, Chris, your question for me, the warrant article was an advisory warrant article. An advisory warrant article, I was accurate. Other than that, that's not true. But an advisory warrant article.
So you're not obligated to follow it, but 78% of the voters asked you to.
Right, it's advisory, so
Yeah.
we took the advisory. I can tell you, we're doing the best we can.
I
Okay,
I
just
understand that it's impossible
And
to
what we're
fulfill
trying to
every
do is
aspect.
not only look after your children, but understand, there are a lot of taxpayers out there who talk to us also about not being able to live in the Conval School District because they can't afford to live here. And they want to be here also. So we're trying to make it work so that we can meet the needs of kids. Excuse me. So we're trying to do that, and that's our mission. So anyway.
I thank you all for your effort. I just hope you fulfill all the points
I hear you,
of the
Chris.
warrant article.
I hear you. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you, board members. Alan, anything? All right. So thank you all for being here. It's been a long evening.